One Piece. After transforming into Ganyu, he joined the Straw Hat Pirates. Chapter 41. Everyone chatted for a few minutes and learned that the Straw Hat were looking for a cook. Johnny seemed to recall something and said, I know a place that has the best chef in the entire East Blue, but I can't guarantee they'll board a pirate ship. Luffy and Usopp were delighted and eagerly asked, what place? It's a restaurant sailing on the sea, full name, Barati, Sea Restaurant. They usually dock near the Grand Line, so there are often strong individuals and villains passing through. Johnny then looked at Zoro. I heard that Hawk Eyes, whom Zoro-san has been looking for, also appears in that vicinity. Hawk Eyes. Zoro's expression froze, and his pupils widened slightly. He hadn't expected to hear that name so soon. A month ago, he would have rushed towards that name without hesitation. But now, he had joined a pirate crew, had companions, and had learned from one of them about the despair-inducing gap in strength between him and Hawk Eyes. 100 times. This was a gap so large it almost made one lose all hope. However, he still couldn't suppress the longing in his heart. Sometimes, if you don't see it for yourself, how will you know how vast the world is? He glanced in a certain direction and saw that the blue-haired girl was also frowning at him, and he couldn't help but smile. Luffy, let's go to that sea restaurant. We'll find a cook, and incidentally, I also want to personally verify if it's really 100 times as exaggerated. Luffy was startled at first, then also smiled. Alright. Our next destination, towards the sea restaurant, forward. 2 days later. After 2 days and 2 nights of sailing, they finally arrived in front of a massive ship. The sea restaurant, Barati. This was a huge merchant ship, more than 10 times larger than the Going Merry. The ship had 3 decks, and a wooden plank extended from the entrance of the first deck, allowing guests to enter the restaurant from there. Wow! It's so magnificent. The Straw Hat were like Grandma Lu entering the Grand View Garden, exclaiming in awe as they disembarked and stepped onto the plank. I'm feeling a bit unwell. I'll rest on the ship for a bit before coming over. Before disembarking, Nami held her forehead, feigning weakness. Naturally, no one suspected anything, they just reminded her not to sleep too long and to remember to bring money for the meal, then they disembarked and left. Only Ganyu gave her a deep look, a gaze that made Nami guiltily avert her eyes. Welcome to the sea restaurant, please come inside. Upon entering the restaurant, a blonde, curly-browed waiter greeted them. He first gave a perfunctory welcome to Luffy and Zoro, who were walking in front, but when he saw the blue-haired girl gracefully walking in at the very end, his body stiffened, and the menu in his hand dropped to the floor with a thud. You. The blonde man stared blankly at Ganyu, as if petrified, not moving an inch. What about me? Ganyu lightly brushed her hair, a blush rising on her cheeks, her calves, encased in black stockings, gently rubbed together as she looked at him with a smile. Normally, she wouldn't make such a flirtatious gesture. But she recognized the identity of the person in front of her and thought that by showing more charm, she might make it easier for Luffy to invite him to join the crew. If she remembered correctly, in the original story, Sanji was initially unwilling to leave Zeph, who had saved his life. This incredibly beautiful lady, may I invite you to dinner? It was unclear whether the charm of this body was too great or if the blonde man simply had no resistance. He swallowed, his excitement and urgency almost tangible, as he stepped in front of Ganyu and knelt on one knee. He's not inviting her to eat, he's clearly proposing. It's not even evening yet, is it? Wasn't it daytime when we just got off the ship? Usopp and Luffy chattered, their eyes filled with shock and surprise. What was up with this waiter? Was this the restaurant's special service? Shut up. You two, don't interrupt my date with this lady. The blonde man turned back in a rage, pointing at Luffy and Usopp, his expression doing a complete 180-degree turn. Huh. It's a date again. Usopp exclaimed. Hey, never mind whether Ganyu will eat or not, I'm starving right now. Luffy said discontentedly. Oh, so your name is Ganyu, what a beautiful name, as charming as your appearance. The blonde man showed an enraptured expression again, conjuring a rose from somewhere and about to hand it to Ganyu. Ganyu found the scene quite amusing and was about to reach out for the rose when Sanji. Don't bother the guests. A figure darted out of the kitchen. The next second, the blonde man kneeling in front of Ganyu was severely hit, suddenly flying out and crashing against the wall with a bang. The rose also fell to the ground and was stepped on by a foot. Sorry, this brat is acting up again. I hope he didn't disturb you, guests. Ganyu was slightly stunned, looking at the long-bearded old man who appeared before her. He was a disabled man, with only one leg, the other leg below the thigh was fitted with a wooden prosthetic. He was tall, with two long braided beards that twitched when he spoke, looking very amusing. Seeing that Ganyu didn't speak, the old man thought Sanji had scared the young lady, and after a moment of contemplation, he said, "Guests, please take a seat at this table, a new waiter will take your order." The Straw Hat Pirates and Johnny, Joseph, sat down at the table he indicated. Then, they watched as the old man dragged Sanji back into the kitchen. Everyone exchanged glances. That guy's quite interesting, why don't we get him to join the crew? Usopp raised an eyebrow. Luffy also showed an interested expression but quickly shook his head, but he's just a waiter, what we need is a cook. That's true. Usopp shook his head regretfully. Hehe, you don't know, do you? Although Sanji is unreliable, he is indeed our ship's sous chef. A burly waiter passed by and interjected after hearing Luffy and the others' conversation. Zoro was somewhat disbelieving. Vice chef, that guy. For some reason, he felt annoyed the first time he saw that blonde man. I wouldn't lie to you. If you don't believe me, you can ask him to cook a dish for you later, preferably if this young lady asks him. The plump waiter chuckled softly and turned to leave. Soon after the plump waiter entered the kitchen, Sanji walked out again. He held a menu, his gaze fixed on Ganyu, and walked straight over. Miss, I will be taking your order next. As he spoke, he placed a beautifully designed ice cream in front of Ganyu. This. Ganyu's eyes lit up, the ice cream indeed looked very tempting. Wow, that ice cream looks so delicious, I want some too. Give me a cup too. Luffy shouted excitedly. Sanji turned and glared at him, this is a special dessert I'm giving to this lady, it's not for sale, and there's only one cup in this restaurant. Having said that, he turned to Ganyu with an excited expression, hoping to see a look of surprise on her pretty face. However, if there's only one cup, then Luffy, you should have it. Ganyu unhesitatingly pushed the ice cream in front of Luffy, speaking softly. Crunch. This was the sound of Sanji's heart breaking. What makes you so special, you brat? He grabbed Luffy by the collar, demanding in a voice filled with extreme envy, jealousy, and despair. Luffy pushed his hand away, then picked up the cup and took a big, satisfied bite, before saying, because I'm her captain. What are you so proud of, you brat? Sanji was furious, driven mad by jealousy. At this moment, Zoro spoke calmly. I say, curly-browed guy, there's more than one guest at this table. When are you going to take our order? Hearing this voice, Sanji turned his head, his gaze lingering on Zoro's green hair for a moment, then spread the menu on the table. Tell me, what do you all want to eat? I'll have the kitchen make it for you. Zoro scanned the menu, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. The prices of the dishes here were not expensive, but they all looked like exquisite delicacies that only nobles could enjoy. No wonder this restaurant was so famous. Start with these. After discussing with Usopp, Johnny, and Joseph, they finally selected over a dozen dishes. As for why Luffy didn't participate in the discussion, it was because he was still enjoying his ice cream. Ordering so much, can you finish it all? Sanji frowned. That's none of your business. You just need to serve the food, waiter. Zoro glanced at him, deliberately emphasizing the word, waiter. I'm not a waiter. A vein pulsed on Sanji's forehead, and he stared at Zoro with an unfriendly expression. It was strange, just a few words with this guy in front of him made him feel incredibly annoyed. You're wearing a waiter's uniform now, doing a waiter's job. If you're not a waiter, could you be a chef? Zoro raised an eyebrow in retort, meeting his gaze without flinching. Ha 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 ha. Hearing these words, Usopp and Luffy, along with Johnny and Joseph, couldn't help but burst into laughter. Alright, I'll personally cook the dishes for your table. I'll show you what a Bharati chef is. Sanji clenched his fists, not even bothering with Ganyu at his side, and pointed at Zoro, saying. But you've ordered so many dishes, once I've served them, you must finish all of them before you can leave. With that, he turned sharply and walked into the kitchen without looking back. After he left, everyone at the table applauded. Zoro, you're amazing. A few words and you got that guy to cook for us personally. Usopp patted Zoro's shoulder. Ha ha ha. This way we can see his skill. Luffy also laughed happily. It was hard to imagine that this kid had also been acting just now. Ganyu glanced outside the door, then suddenly stood up. You all wait here for him to serve the food. I have something to do, I'm going out for a bit. With that, she walked straight out of the restaurant, her steps quick, seemingly in a hurry. Is she? Usopp looked confused, anyone could tell what Ganyu was going out to do. Zoro shook his head lightly, don't mind her, it's nothing big anyway. Maybe she's just going back to the ship to change clothes. Women are just that troublesome. Is that so? Luffy nodded, but felt a little puzzled in his heart. How come he couldn't remember Ganyu ever changing clothes? Of course, Ganyu wasn't going back to the ship to change clothes. Her clothes were not made of ordinary fabric, but were formed from scales when the Kylin transformed into human form. Her only purpose in returning to the ship was to confirm what Nami, who remained on board, intended to do. On the going merry. As Ganyu stepped onto the deck, she couldn't help but freeze. Nami stood alone in the center of the ship, leaning against the mast, clutching a rope used to tie the sail. You're here, Ganyu. Seeing Ganyu return to the ship at this moment, she showed no surprise on her face. She turned her head, revealing a faint smile. How did you know I would come back? Ganyu walked towards Nami step by step. We've shared a bed for the past few days, sleeping together every day, staying in the same room. I'm sure you must have noticed long ago. Nami sighed, speaking softly. Yes, you want to leave. Ganyu approached her, looking up slightly into her eyes, and asked, why do you want to leave us, Nami? She naturally knew the real reason Nami wanted to leave them. The reason she still asked was to make Nami say those words herself. Help me. Ganyu. The groundwork laid over so many days had indeed worked. In response to Ganyu's question, Nami hugged her tightly, resting her head on her shoulder. My hometown has been occupied by a group of fishman pirates for 10 years. For these 10 years, I've worked hard day after day to buy back Kokoyasi village from them. Nami cried as she recounted her entire experience. So that's how it is. Ganyu comforted her by patting her back. Even though she was closely embracing a beautiful damselette with a good figure at this moment, there was no ripple in her heart. She just said softly. Why didn't you tell us earlier? Whether it's Luffy, Zoro, or even Usopp, none of them would stand by and watch your hometown be bullied by pirates. I was worried you would also be in danger. Nami choked out. You underestimate Luffy and Zoro too much. He's just a pirate worth 20 million berries. Didn't Buggy, worth 15 million, and Kuro, worth 16 million, both fall to Luffy? Ganyu retorted. But that guy is different. He's a fishman, a monster, terrifyingly strong. A hint of fear flashed in Nami's eyes, the shadow Arlong had branded into her heart over 10 years. Ever since she witnessed the terror of the fishmen, she had never considered reclaiming Kokoyasi village by force. Gathering 100 million berries to buy Kokoyasi village from Arlong was her only way out. Until she met Ganyu, met Luffy, witnessing their unimaginable strength repeatedly, watching them defeat one strong enemy after another, a glimmer of hope finally ignited in her heart. However, what later prevented her from revealing her tragic past, besides worrying about her companions getting involved with the fishmen and losing their lives, was also a mix of struggle and inferiority. Luffy had said when helping Usopp that he wasn't doing it out of sympathy, but because Usopp dared to stand up and protect his village, facing an entire pirate crew alone. Such courage was the reason Luffy helped him. But what about herself? She completely lacked the courage to fight Arlong, and even had the Arlong pirates tattoo on her shoulder. Such a person didn't deserve Luffy and their help, nor did she want to gain their sympathy. She still wanted to save Kokoyasi village in her own way. I'm sorry, Ganyu. Nami, holding Ganyu, suddenly pulled out a wet towel from her embrace and covered Ganyu's mouth and nose. After covering it for more than 10 seconds, Nami finally released her hand, intending to lay the unconscious Ganyu flat on the deck, but found the other person smilingly looking at her. How could you? This won't knock me out, little Nami. Saying that, She snatched the towel, and under Nami's astonished gaze, covered her face with it. As is well known, the physical constitutions of humans and Keelins cannot be lumped together. The anesthetic Nami prepared from who knows where had no effect on Ganyu, but Nami herself fainted the moment she touched it. Ganyu steadily caught the limp girl in her arms, lowered her head to gaze at Nami's peaceful sleeping face, and couldn't help but smile slightly. To try and knock out a Keelin with an anesthetic, you really came up with that. Not to mention her extraordinary immortal beast body is inherently immune to most toxins in the world, just her massive original form isn't something that a small amount of anesthetic on a damp towel could take down. She gently lifted the girl in her arms in a princess carry and walked lightly towards the cabin. Ganyu carefully placed Nami on the bed in the bedroom, covered her with a thin blanket, admired the girl's beautiful sleeping face for a while longer, and then got up and left the room. Creak. After closing the door, Ganyu took a brass key from her pocket, inserted it into the lock, gently turned it once, and completely locked the door from the outside. Sleep well. When you wake up, everything will be different. Burati Restaurant. When Ganyu returned to the restaurant, she saw the table was already full of dishes, and Zoro, Usopp, and the others were eating with gusto. She returned to her seat, saying with a hint of dissatisfaction, "You didn't even wait for me after the dishes were served." Big sister. Seeing her return, Johnny and Joseph both sat up stiffly, stopping their eating. "I told you not to call me big sister." Ganyu gave them a speechless look. These two guys had been respectfully calling her big sister ever since she cured Joseph's scurvy with orange juice that day, and they just couldn't change it. The two were startled at her words, then said in unison, "Yes, big brother." PFF'd. Zoro, who was drinking, sprayed out his drink when he heard this. "Forget it, just call me big sister." Ganyu sighed helplessly, gave Zoro a look of disdain, and said, "Don't dirty the restaurant floor, be careful someone might come looking for trouble." "Hey, you mean that swirly brow? Am I afraid of him?" Zoro snorted dismissively, his brows clearly furrowed when he mentioned that name, "Am I afraid of him?" Ganyu ignored him, picked up the chopsticks on the table, took a piece from a brightly colored dish, and put it into her mouth, chewing slowly. The next second, her eyes widened in surprise. So delicious. Her eyes curved into crescents, and a flush appeared on her delicate, fair cheeks. It was too delicious, more delicious than any dish she had ever eaten in her previous life. Sanji's cooking skills were indeed top-notch, he was truly worthy of being the chef for the future protagonist group. Isn't it great? We all made that face after tasting it. I didn't expect that guy, despite his bad attitude, would be such an amazing cook. Usopp said excitedly. It would be really great to have such a chef on the ship. Ganyu exclaimed from the bottom of her heart, took a few more bites of food, and then asked, "Where's Luffy?" "Where did he go?" "He went out, said he was going for a stroll outside." Usopp answered casually, then suddenly remembered something and added, "Oh, right, before you came back, a fierce-looking pirate broke in and was chased away by the chefs here. Not long after, Luffy also went out." A pirate. A thoughtful look flashed in Ganyu's eyes, and she quickly identified the visitor. It must have been Jin. Jin was an executive of the Krieg pirates, sent out by Krieg to find food. Their pirate crew of 5,000 had encountered Hawkeye, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, shortly after entering the Grand Line. He had cut down more than half of their fleet with a single sword stroke, also shattering their belief in establishing themselves in the Grand Line. The battered remnants of the Krieg pirates had returned to the East Blue from the Grand Line in disarray, and what they needed most now was food. In the original story, Jin found the Bharati Sea restaurant, but he was penniless and was driven out of the restaurant. Just as he was about to starve to death at the restaurant's entrance, Sanji gave him a plate of egg-fried rice. This act of kindness saved Jin's life, but it also brought disaster to the Bharati Sea restaurant. "Everyone, I've decided." Luffy excitedly ran in from the doorway, announcing loudly as soon as he reached the dining table, "Sanji will be our ship's cook." Sanji. Zoro and Usopp looked up in surprise. "He's the chef who cooked for us." Luffy excitedly recounted what he had just seen. "At the restaurant's entrance, I found him actually giving food to that pirate who was kicked out. He's a really great guy." "Really? Sounds like he has a good heart." Usopp exclaimed. "Hey, a good heart, huh?" Zoro shook his head, a meaningful look flashing in his eyes. Although he didn't recognize Jin's identity, he could tell that the other party was no ordinary character. Saving such a pirate might not be a good thing. So, did Sanji agree to join the crew? Ganyu asked. No. Luffy shook his head, looking a bit dejected, but quickly looked up again, saying firmly, I will definitely make him join us. Ganyu, Zoro, and Usopp exchanged glances, silently mourning for Sanji in their hearts. Poor fellow, to be targeted by their captain, what awaited him next would be endless torment. The midday sun shone on the sea, sparkling. Throughout the morning, a peculiar scene unfolded at the Bharati restaurant. A straw hat boy followed a blonde waiter like a shadow, repeatedly saying the same phrase. Sanji, join us. Sanji, join us. Sanji, join. Whether wiping tables, sweeping, mopping, or going in and out of the kitchen, this voice was always present, like a shadow, except for brief moments when taking customer orders. In short, he clung to him like a persistent annoying pest. Old man, can't you just kick this annoying kid out? Sanji was on the verge of collapse, even trying to get head chef Zeph to order Luffy's expulsion. But Zeph merely glanced at Luffy indifferently, unmoved. He's not bothering the customers. Handle your own affairs. If you can't even handle this small matter, then get out of this restaurant. Sanji trembled with anger, but he couldn't do anything about the old man. Thank you, old man, but I will definitely bring Sanji back to the ship. Luffy chuckled. Zeph didn't reply, but looked at Luffy and Sanji a few more times, a subtle smile appearing on his face. Kid, if you can do it, take him away. He's not much use staying in the restaurant anyway. Leaving that remark, Zeph turned and left. Hey, you old geezer, clarify what you mean by, I'm not much use in the restaurant, before you leave. Sanji was furious at these words, but Zeph completely ignored him and quickly disappeared. He turned around, wanting to vent his anger on this annoying kid, but just as he opened his mouth, he closed it again. Because a stunning blue figure was sitting at a table not far from them, watching them with her beautiful eyes. Alright, Sanji had to admit something. The reason he hadn't kicked this annoying kid out was so he could look at her more in the restaurant. Why did this kid get to have such a beautiful female crewmate? He almost joined because he was so moved. At the dining table, Usopp, who had been observing Luffy's harassment tactics with great interest, withdrew his gaze, gently nudged Ganyu beside him with his elbow, and asked in a low voice. Ganyu, do you think Luffy can succeed? Ganyu picked up a complimentary drink given by Sanji from the table, took a small sip, and said, probably, but I think it's more likely he'll get a beating than succeed. Judging by the current situation, that's highly probable indeed. Usopp nodded in agreement. Putting himself in the situation, if he were to be relentlessly pestered by Luffy like that all morning, he'd probably find it hard to resist not hitting him. Thinking of this, his curiosity was piqued, and he leaned in closer to ask, Ganyu, were you and Zoro also roped onto the ship by him like that? Not me, but Zoro was certainly annoyed by him back then. Ganyu's lips curved into a reminiscent smile, recalling how Zoro was on the verge of breakdown from the annoyance. Upon hearing this, Usopp couldn't help but clap his hands gleefully. So Zoro had such a miserable time too, ha ha ha. Just then, a figure flashed behind Usopp like a whirlwind, its resentful gaze almost burning 2 holes in his back, making Usopp shiver suddenly. Long nose. Sanji's voice was filled with suppressed rage. Who gave you permission to talk so close to Miss Ganyu? Usopp knew who it was the moment he heard the voice. He reluctantly turned his head and, sure enough, met Sanji's eyes, which were brimming with envy, jealousy, and hatred. Aren't you working? Why do you have time to come over here? I'm here to deliver a meal to Miss Ganyu. Sanji held up a bento box, respectfully placed it on the table beside Ganyu, and his tone instantly softened. Miss Ganyu, this is a special love-filled meal I carefully prepared for you, infused with all my affection and... Stop. Ganyu decisively raised her hand, stopping him from continuing those cringe-worthy lines, and clarified calmly, I already said, it's not for me to eat, it's for another crew member on our ship. Who? Which scoundrel dares to enjoy the love-filled meal I specifically prepared for Miss Ganyu? Sanji looked as if struck by lightning, his expression instantly crumbling, ready to challenge that person to a duel. Nami. Ganyu uttered the name lightly, then picked up the bento box and turned to leave decisively. Sanji froze in place. His lips moved slightly, and Usopp, who was closest, could vaguely hear his broken murmuring. Nami, Nami, Miss Nami. Suddenly, Sanji seemed to be injected with a new soul, turning abruptly and grabbing Usopp's shoulders tightly, shaking him vigorously. On your ship, is there another beautiful lady named Nami? Yes, there is one, Usopp, dizzy from the shaking, answered with difficulty, then felt curious. Wait, how do you know she's beautiful? That's not important. What's important is that you have two angels on your ship. Sanji was completely lost in his own fantasy, his eyes turning into hearts, pink bubbles seemingly floating around him, and he froze in place like a statue. Just then, Luffy, who had been pestering Sanji all morning, happened to walk over. Seeing this scene, he asked curiously, what's wrong with him? I don't know, he just suddenly turned like this. Usopp spread his hands. Luffy never wasted time on things he couldn't understand. He walked up to Sanji and called out in his characteristic, energetic voice, Sanji, join us. However, this time, as soon as he finished speaking, Sanji suddenly snapped back to reality, reversed his grip, and pressed down hard on Luffy's shoulders, his gaze so fervent it almost shot fire. Tell me. How did you kidnap Miss Ganyu and Miss Nami onto your ship? By inviting them, just like I am now, of course. Luffy said matter-of-factly. And it was true, back then, whether it was Ganyu or Nami, he only had to invite them once, and they joined, on the other side. Ganyu returned to the Going Merry with the bento box. As soon as she stepped onto the deck, she saw Zoro sweating profusely while training on the deck. She didn't want to disturb him and walked straight towards the stairs leading to the female crew members' quarters. Zoro, however, called out to her, his gaze sweeping over the bento box in her hand. Where's Nami? Why has she been in her room all day? Ganyu paused, shook the bento box in her hand, and said naturally, she's feeling a bit unwell and resting. I'm bringing her something to eat. Hearing this, Zoro stared at her for a long while, then said suspiciously, is that so? I always feel like you're hiding something from us. As soon as he said this, Ganyu's expression stiffened, but she reacted extremely quickly, adjusting herself soon after. She reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear and said, why would I hide anything from you? You should focus on your own training, lest you can't even defeat someone with a small knife when the time comes. With that, Ganyu quickened her pace and hurried down the stairs. Zoro watched her slightly hurried retreating figure, pouting helplessly. Did she really take him for a fool? Forget it, if she didn't want to say, then so be it. It probably wasn't a big deal anyway. Another 1,000 swings, a small knife wants to defeat me. What a joke. Ganyu gently unlocked the door with a key. The moment she pushed the door open and stepped inside, she saw a figure pounce on her. Ganyu seemed caught off guard and was tackled to the ground by the other person, the bento box slipping from her hand and rolling to the side. An orange-haired girl straddled her waist, her hands firmly pinning Ganyu's wrists, her orange short hair slightly disheveled, and her breathing rapid. Nami, I'm here to bring you food. Ganyu blinked, looking up at the orange-haired girl above her, her voice still calm. Why did you stop me? Nami lowered her head, her hair falling and brushing against Ganyu's cheeks, a little ticklish. Her eyes were red, her face covered in tear stains, clearly having cried alone before this, and her voice carried a suppressed sob. Because if you go alone, you won't succeed. Ganyu replied, her eyes devoid of any emotion. How can you be so certain? Nami retorted agitatedly, tears welling up again. With the treasures currently on this ship, I've already saved up 100 million berries. If I give the money to Arlong, he'll agree to spare Kokoyasi village. Then, she forced her eyes wide open, gazing almost pleadingly at Ganyu, who was pinned beneath her. Please, Ganyu. She knew better than anyone that with Ganyu's superhuman strength, the only reason she could temporarily restrain her was that Ganyu simply didn't want to hurt her. If she couldn't persuade Ganyu, there was no way she could leave alone with the money and the ship. Ganyu didn't speak, but slowly began to exert force. As she used the strength in her waist, abdomen, and arms, their positions easily reversed. In the blink of an eye, Ganyu was on top, gently pinning Nami to the ground. Ganyu released one hand, gently caressed Nami's cheek, and said, Nami, you've followed us and seen many pirates along the way, whether it's Buggy or Kuro. Do you think any of them would keep their promises? But you haven't even met Arlong, so how can you be sure he, woo. Nami tried to argue, but as she spoke, her voice grew softer and softer, eventually turning into suppressed whimpers. Because she knew all too well in her heart, even she herself didn't believe Arlong would keep his word. Nami's body trembled, her voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. What should I do? It's simple. Ganyu helped Nami sit up, then picked up the bento box that had rolled to the side, opened the lid, and pushed it in front of Nami. Inside were exquisitely arranged, fragrant dishes, with a slightly comical heart drawn in sauce beside them. First, eat the meal made by a certain perverted chef, which he claims is filled with heart. Ganyu's voice carried a hint of teasing, then became incredibly serious and warm. Then, wait for us to accompany you and take back Kokoyasi village from Arlong. Nami heard this and suddenly looked up, staring at Ganyu in disbelief. She had never imagined that Ganyu would help her so unreservedly. I don't deserve your help. I never had good intentions when I first joined you, I just wanted to use you to earn berries, and then steal all your money. Nami said, head bowed, her face full of guilt. Stop, you should save those apologies for the captain. Ganyu raised her hand and covered Nami's mouth, then pointed to the bento box below, smiling as she said, I told you, I'm just here to bring you food. Nami stared blankly at Ganyu, then looked down at the bento box in front of her. When she saw the big heart, she laughed through her tears and said, who made this? It's so disgusting. Time slowly passed, and night gradually enveloped the sky. A meeting of the Straw Hat Pirates was in full swing inside the brightly lit cabin of the Going Merry. What? Nami's hometown has been taken over by a fishman pirates. What a joke. Buying back her own village with her own money. And 100 million berries. That's preposterous. When Nami tearfully revealed the truth about Kokoyasi village and the heavy promise of 100 million berries, Luffy instantly sprang from his seat, his fists clenching with a cracking sound. Zoro also sharply opened his drowsy eyes, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword hilt. Usopp also empathized, believing that if Luffy and his crew hadn't arrived at Syrup Village when they did, their village might have fallen into Kuro's hands later on. Arlong's strength is not ordinary, his bounty is as high as 20 million berries, and he has a group of powerful fishman subordinates. Rushing in without any preparation would be too dangerous. Seeing her companion's agitated emotions, Nami quickly stopped them. Why think so much, Nami? Just watch me beat them all up. Luffy rubbed his hands together, his mind now filled with the thought of beating up fishmen. Saying this, he was about to order Zoro and Usopp to set sail directly for Kokoyasi village. Ganyu secretly shook her head and sighed. As expected, Luffy couldn't help himself once he knew about this. However, if they left now, the Bharati Sea restaurant might suffer destruction from the Krieg pirates tomorrow. If there were no accidents, the Krieg pirates and Dracul Mahawk were both on their way there. Ganyu thought for a moment and said, Luffy, don't be so hasty. We can discuss a plan before taking action. A plan. Luffy's brows furrowed into a knot upon hearing this, then he shook his head forcefully. I don't care, I'm going to beat up that guy named Arlong anyway. He never bothered with plans when he did things. Alright, you don't have to listen to the plan. Ganyu had expected his reaction. She smiled with pursed lips and said, but, are you going to abandon Sanji, the chef you've decided on? Ah. Luffy's movements instantly froze, his face full of struggle. He had indeed decided on Sanji as his chef. He had spent the entire day today, finally getting Sanji to consider joining the crew. Leaving now would be too much of a pity. Ganyu saw his hesitation and continued, Luffy, we can split into two groups. One team stays here to help you recruit crew members, and the other team accompanies Nami to Kokoyasi village. Luffy's eyes gradually lit up as he listened, and he nodded repeatedly, okay, that's a good idea. Everyone else also nodded, but they were all praising Ganyu's ability to always rein in their impulsive captain. So who stays, and who goes with Nami? Zoro asked abruptly, a hint of expectation in his eyes. This was a rare opportunity to cut down some fish men, and he couldn't miss it. Ganyu pointed at him and Luffy, saying, "You and Luffy stay. The rest of you will go with Nami to Kokoyashi village." Huh. Isn't Luffy alone enough to recruit that swirly-browed guy? What am I staying here for? Zoro said, a little displeased. Or maybe I should stay. I actually have a disease where I'll die if I see a fish man. Usopp also raised his hand, speaking weakly. X2. After speaking, both looked at each other in surprise, then at Ganyu. They clearly wanted Ganyu to swap them. Logically, the two should indeed swap. Zoro's combat power was significantly higher, and it would be safer for him and Ganyu to escort Nami back to her hometown. But, to everyone's surprise, Ganyu directly shook her head and refused, leaving no room for discussion. No. By what right do you make such a decision? Zoro frowned, his tone questioning. Usopp, though not daring to question directly, also nodded secretly beside him, supporting Zoro. Ganyu slightly raised her head, a meaningful curve on her lips, and looked directly at Zoro. Are you sure you don't intend to listen to me? Even if, doing so might make you lose an opportunity to see him. What are you talking about? Zoro's retort stopped abruptly. Because, right before his eyes, Ganyu silently mouthed two clear words to him, Dracul Mahawk. Dracul Mahawk. The world's strongest swordsman, Dracul Mahawk. Did she mean, by staying here, he could see that man? There was no mistake, she would never deceive him about something like this. Zoro's heart surged with stormy waves. After a brief moment to calm himself, he suddenly stood up, his gaze shining brightly as he looked out of the room. I'm going out to practice my sword for a bit. Leaving that one sentence, he walked out alone with his sword, under everyone's bewildered gazes. Soon after, the swishing sound of a blade cutting through the air could be heard from the deck. Is he having an episode? Luffy pointed at Zoro outside, asking with a worried expression. This behavior of being in a meeting 1 second and then running out to train the next, even Luffy found abnormal. Don't worry about him. Anyway, we're not leaving today, so let him do whatever he wants. Ganyu gently waved her hand, then turned to look at Usopp, a curve on her lips. As for you, I don't remember you having such a rare disease. If you're saying this because you're scared, then I'll have to tell Kaya about this later, you know. She also had a way to handle this timid, cowardly, and habitual liar of a companion. Kaya was his Achilles heel. Usopp could accept being looked down upon by anyone, but never by Kaya. And coincidentally, Ganyu had a rather good relationship with Kaya in Syrup Village, and there was a high possibility of visiting Kaya again after their voyage ended. Usopp naturally understood this point, and his face instantly changed. He quickly corrected himself. Aha. I remembered wrong just now. What I actually have is a disease where I'll die if I don't see a fish man. That's right. That's how it is. What kind of disease is that? Nami couldn't help but put her hand on her forehead and complain, feeling incredibly exhausted. These guys gave her absolutely no sense of reliability. Perhaps the only one who could make her feel at ease was Ganyu, who always remained calm by her side. But it also had to be said that it was this kind of atmosphere that made it much easier for her to face them after revealing everything. Nami took a deep breath. All right, since Ganyu has made the arrangements, let's all act accordingly now, Luffy. Luffy nodded, slapped the table with his large hand, and shouted with full vigor, all right. Let's go. A few minutes later, Luffy and Zoro stood before the closed doors of the Bharati restaurant, watching the Going Merry hoist its sails and gradually merge into the deep night. For a long time, Zoro, I suddenly remembered something. What is it? Were Johnny and Joseph still sleeping on the ship? Zoro fell silent upon hearing this, rubbed his forehead, thought for a moment, and then said, anyway, they're bounty hunters too. Knowing that this trip is to deal with the 20 million bounty fish man pirates, they'll probably be very happy, right? The next day. Bharati, the sea restaurant. Bang. The peaceful morning was instantly shattered by an uninvited guest who kicked open the door. The newcomer was over 2 meters tall, with bulging muscles and a dark cloak. As soon as he entered, he scanned every corner of the restaurant with his aggressive gaze, as if he had already claimed it as his own spoil of war. Guests, if you don't have money to pay for your meal, our restaurant does not provide any service. Several chefs noticed the unusual situation and rushed out of the kitchen, armed with weapons. Bharati was located in a sea area near the Grand Line, one of the most rampant areas for pirates and villains in the East Blue. To be able to establish themselves here, the restaurant's chefs were naturally not ordinary people, their combat prowess was not inferior to most pirates. Several burly chefs surrounded him, and seeing that this customer was clearly not there for a normal meal, they warned him. Get out. You're not welcome here. Boom. While the words were still echoing in the air, the chef who had just spoken suffered a heavy blow, his eyes rolled back, and he spat blood as he flew backward. What? The remaining chefs were shocked, their eyes wide with fear and dread as they looked at the evil guest's shoulder. Just a moment ago, a barrage of bullets, like from a machine gun, had shot out. A good restaurant. This ship is mine. The evil guest's voice was deep and oppressive. He spread his arms, flinging open his cloak to reveal a shimmering golden, full-body heavy armor, densely covered with dark gun muzzles and cannon barrels on his shoulders, arms, and sides of his waist. This guy was actually here to rob them. Do you think you're the only one with weapons? The remaining chefs recovered from their panic, their anger overcoming their fear, and they all raised their firearms and pulled the triggers. Bang bang bang. For a moment, guns and cannons roared in unison, and several bullets and missiles were fired simultaneously, instantly engulfing the man. It hit. Several chefs showed excitement, having witnessed their bullets and missiles directly strike the evil guest's chest. But their excitement lasted only a moment before their expressions froze. They heard a dense clang of metal, and sparks flew everywhere on the golden armor. All the bullets and cannonballs that were fired were repelled as if they had hit a copper wall and iron barrier, failing to harm the opponent in the slightest. You think such tickle-like attacks can destroy my invincible armor? Dream on. Krieg laughed wildly, and after deflecting all the bullets, he stepped forward, thrusting both hands out to forcefully press them against the faces of the two chefs closest to him. Clang. Two dull thuds accompanied by muffled groans of pain, as the two chefs were brutally slammed to the ground by his immense strength, the hard wooden floor shattering in response, sending splinters flying. Captain, you promised me you wouldn't attack this restaurant. Just as all the diners and staff were in shock. Another figure rushed in from outside the door, gripping Krieg's bulging arm tightly. His face was not unfamiliar. It was Jin, the pirate Sanji had saved with fried rice yesterday. And the person he called captain was naturally, Captain Krieg, with a bounty of 17 million belly. He had 5,000 subordinates and 50 pirate ships, and was known as the largest pirate crew in the East Blue. Get lost. Krieg impatiently waved his arm, and the immense force directly flung Jin away like a sandbag. Naive fool, just stand there and watch me seize this ship, then we'll go to the Grand Line again. Half a month ago, Krieg led 50 pirate fleets into the Grand Line. In just 7 days, most of them were annihilated by Dracul Mahawk, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, with only the main ship, Dreadnought Saber, escaping the Grand Line. His last ship was also on the verge of disintegration. He came to Bharati not only to find food but also to seize a new ship that could carry his ambition. Hawkeye. I never provoked you. Just wait. Once I seize this ship and replenish my forces, I will definitely come back for revenge. Krieg's eyes were filled with hatred. That man had destroyed everything he had with just one sword. But he didn't think that man was invincible. When they entered the Grand Line, they were unfamiliar with the route and encountered severe stormy weather, and it was at this time that the Hawkeye man attacked them, having the advantage of timing and terrain. Therefore, Krieg was not very convinced. Oh, you said you've seen Hawkeye. Did he do anything to you guys? Suddenly, a somewhat lazy voice abruptly sounded, breaking the atmosphere in the restaurant, which was so tense it was almost solidified. Krieg froze at the words, looking in the direction of the voice. He saw a green-haired swordsman and a straw hat boy sitting at a nearby dining table. The two were staring at him intently, their faces not showing the slightest fear, but rather a kind of curious expression. Krieg narrowed his eyes, sensing that these two were not ordinary, and said coldly, "Kid, this is not something you can know." Hey! The green-haired swordsman shook his head slightly after hearing this, a mocking curve appearing at the corner of his mouth. Even if you don't say it, I can probably guess. You guys were chased back from the Grand Line by him, weren't you? Bang 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 bang. Before he finished speaking, Krieg raised his hand, and the gun muzzles on his shoulders fired a series of sparking bullets. Gum gum balloon. To Krieg's surprise, before the green-haired swordsman could react, the straw hat boy next to him suddenly took a deep breath, and his entire body instantly inflated like a balloon into a giant sphere. All the bullets struck the elastic Gomu body, and then were fiercely bounced back at an even faster speed. Nani? Krieg's eyes widened, and in his astonishment, he quickly raised his armored arms to protect himself. Fortunately, his armor was also incredibly hard, and the bullets also bounced off the moment they touched it. You are a devil fruit user. As the smoke cleared, Krieg's face gradually emerged from the smoke, his eyes warily fixed on the Straw Hat Boy. Who, exactly are you? My name is Monkey D. Luffy, I'm a Gomu man who ate the gum fruit, rubber fruit, and I'm the man who will become the Pirate King. The Straw Hat Boy stepped onto the dining table, his voice confident and exceptionally loud, echoing throughout the entire restaurant. Gomu man. Krieg frowned. As the overlord of the East Blue, he naturally knew of the existence of devil fruit, and his tone was solemn. So, you are also pirates. That's right. Luffy responded decisively. He looked up and down at Krieg's exaggerated golden armor, and with pure curiosity, asked, You just said you went to the Grand Line, why are you back now? Although his knowledge of navigation was almost zero, Luffy knew that the one piece he was looking for was in the Grand Line. So, having finally met someone who had been to the Grand Line, he naturally wanted to inquire about some information. Grand Line. It was better not to mention it. As soon as it was brought up, Krieg's face instantly became incredibly ugly, his eyes filled with deep fear and regret. If we had been more prepared, and understood more information about the Grand Line before going, we would never have come back so dejectedly like this. So you guys failed because you weren't prepared. Luffy tilted his head, asking with great interest. He was curious about everything related to the Grand Line. No, it was because of that man. Agni walked over and stood beside Krieg. As if recalling a terrifying scene, his lips trembled as he said. That man with eyes as sharp as a hawk, he appeared. We hadn't even figured out what was happening, and the fleet's ships sank one by one, a terrifying sight that was hard to believe was real. One person defeated all of you. Luffy also broke out in a cold sweat after hearing this, instinctively turning his head to look at Zoro. Is this the person you want to challenge? Ah, it must be him. The strongest in the world. So this is the level. Zoro, on the other hand, smiled with relief, his eyes seemingly burning with flames. He was now absolutely sure that the opportunity Ganyu spoke of last night was referring to today. The man he had been searching for was finally about to appear. Alright, no more nonsense. Krieg's rough roar interrupted everyone's thoughts. He took a few heavy steps forward, looking down at Luffy and Zoro from above. I'm here today for food and a ship. I'm not interested in fighting other pirates. If you don't want to be blasted to smithereens by my weapons, leave immediately. Luffy didn't respond, standing still, seemingly deep in thought. Seeing his state, everyone in the hall thought he was intimidated by Krieg's power and dared not speak further. Krieg also thought he had backed down, scoffed, and then turned to look at Zoro. For some reason, this man looked a little familiar to him. It seemed like, what you do has nothing to do with us. Whether we leave or not has nothing to do with you. Before Krieg could recall who this man was, Zoro spoke in a calm tone. He didn't want to fight anyone before Hawkeye's arrived. Of course, most importantly, his captain had not given any order to fight. HMPH. Krieg snorted, no longer bothering with Luffy and Zoro, and turned to look at the restaurant staff and chefs gradually emerging from the kitchen, his eyes turning cold. Immediately prepare food for 100 people for me. Then, all of you get off this ship. You. Hearing this, all the Bharati staff's faces instantly turned ashen. This guy not only wanted to rob their restaurant, but he also wanted them to prepare food for the bandits. How could they agree to such an unreasonable demand? You want us to prepare food for the enemies who attacked us? Impossible. Exactly. If there's no money, we won't provide any service. That's the rule of Bharati restaurant. Everyone was indignant and loudly refused. Oh. Refusing me, are you? It seems you've misunderstood. Krieg slowly raised one hand, and at the same time, the muzzles and cannon barrels on his full body armor rotated in unison as if alive, their cold metallic gleam aimed at everyone present. I'm not ordering from a menu. This is an order. No one is allowed to defy me. As his words fell, the hall fell into a dead silence. Everyone had just witnessed the power of Krieg's armor and weapons. Under this absolute display of force, for a moment, no one dared to speak up in defiance. Luffy and Zoro still showed no signs of intervening, standing by and watching silently. However, Luffy's eyes were fixed on the direction of the kitchen entrance, seemingly anticipating someone's appearance. Tap, tap, tap. Before long, a man in a sharp black suit, with meticulously combed blonde hair, and a lit cigarette dangling from his lips, walked straight out of the kitchen with a poker face. He effortlessly carried a large, bulging package almost half his height with one hand, walked up to Krieg, and placed it on the ground with a thud. Here's food for 100 people. Take it. He exhaled a smoke ring as if no one else was there, not even glancing at Krieg. Sanji. Everyone recognized the newcomer and gasped in surprise, their faces filled with confusion and worry. He's finally out. In contrast, Luffy and Zoro smiled simultaneously, sensing that the show was about to begin. Meanwhile, on the other side of the sea. After a night of sailing, Going Merry finally slowly approached the coastline of Kokoyashi village. Most of this area is under the control of the Arlong pirates' crew, so there aren't many places we can land safely. Nami, acting as a guide, directed Usopp to steer the ship, making Going Merry circle half the island, finally stopping in a secluded cove. This was located on the westernmost side of the island, rarely visited. The shore was a dense forest, right next to a steep cliff facing the sea, and one could jump directly onto the cliff from Going Merry's deck. Nami, Ganyu, Usopp, and the unexpectedly accompanying Johnny and Joseph disembarked in turn. This morning, Ganyu found Johnny and Joseph sleeping soundly in the ship's cabin. After waking them up with 2 slaps, mimicking Zoro's way of waking Luffy, she informed them of everything. Upon learning that Nami, their savior's hometown, had been cruelly occupied by pirates, they joined without hesitation to repay her kindness. There won't be any wild beasts hiding in there, will there? Usopp looked at the small forest, shrinking his neck. Nami was the first to step into the forest. Can any beast be scarier than a fish man? This is already the safest landing spot. Johnny and Joseph exchanged glances, then steeled themselves and followed. They had only recently learned that it was the fish man pirates who occupied Nami's hometown. But Nami and Ganyu had cured Joseph's scurvy with orange juice, so to repay the kindness, they had no choice but to brace themselves. With just the 5 of us, and Big Brother Zoro and Big Brother Luffy not here, isn't landing on this island a bit dangerous? Johnny glanced at Nami, Usopp, and Ganyu beside him. Including himself and Joseph, there were 5 people in total, and 4 of them together might not even be able to defeat one fishman executive. Only this blue-haired girl, whom even Big Brother Zoro dared not provoke, seemed to possess great strength. It is indeed very dangerous. Usopp immediately proposed what he considered the safest plan. It's best if we find a place to hide on the island now and wait for Luffy and Zoro to arrive before making any plans, right? With 2 major combat forces missing, it was best for them to lie low on the island first. Nami nodded gently, agreeing with Usopp's plan. I'll take you to my sister Nojiko's place first. You can wait there for Luffy and Zoro. Nami's sister's house. That should be a safe place. Usopp secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then noticed that Nami's words didn't include herself, so he asked again, it sounds like, you don't plan to stay with us. Do you have another plan? Nami heard this and fell silent for a moment. Then, under everyone's astonished gaze, she slowly raised her hand and rolled up the sleeve of her short-sleeved shirt on her left arm, revealing a striking blue tattoo on her fair arm. This is the symbol of the Arlong pirates' crew. Nami said in a low voice, suppressing her emotions, my current identity is actually a member of the Arlong pirates' crew, so if I go back now, I won't be suspected at all. Nami said slowly. Ganyu's gaze lingered on the tattoo for a moment, and she said with a hint of heartache, you want to return to the Fishman pirates, and when Luffy and Zoro arrive, we'll coordinate from inside and out to deal with them. Nami pulled down her short sleeve, patted a large package on her back, and said with a playful smile, "I've had a great harvest this time. When they see these berries, they'll definitely throw a party to celebrate for me. I'll find an opportunity during the banquet to use a sleeping drug to knock out a group of people. Then you guys can make your move and wipe out all the fish men." What she carried on her back was naturally all the treasure the Straw Hat Pirates had accumulated so far. There were a total of 10 million berries, half of which were stolen from Buggy, and the other half from Kuro's Black Cat Pirates. On the ship, she had discussed with her companions that they would make a big fuss with these 10 million berries. "Wow! That's a very feasible plan," Usopp exclaimed, looking at Nami, then at Ganyu. With Nami as an inside agent, and Ganyu, Luffy, Zoro, and other strong individuals, defeating the Arlong Pirates crew didn't seem impossible, did it? "That sleeping drug of yours." Ganyu hesitated for a moment, but still couldn't help confirming, "Is it really effective against fishmen?" She still remembered how Nami had tried to drug her with a sleeping potion a day ago, but it had no effect at all. "Of course it's effective." Nami's face flushed, also recalling what had happened a day ago, and her expression turned strange. "I've successfully used it on fishmen before. It worked perfectly. Your body structure is even more outrageous than those fishmen. You're simply not human." At that time, to deal with Ganyu, she had deliberately increased the dosage, enough to knock out 3 burly men. However, it had no effect on Ganyu. From that moment on, she realized that this little sister, who looked even more delicate than herself, probably had a physical strength even more exaggerated than Arlong's. And Nami, who had never left the East Blue, simply couldn't imagine that there could be monsters with stronger physiques than fishmen in the world. "I'm not human to begin with." Ganyu muttered to herself, but still didn't pursue the topic further. She pointed to the forest. "Let's go, Nami, you'll have to lead the way here. Hehe, just follow me, I'm very familiar with this place, I guarantee you won't encounter a single fish man." Nami patted her chest and led everyone into the forest, heading straight in one direction. About 10 minutes later, the trees in their line of sight became increasingly sparse, and the outlines of buildings gradually emerged ahead. Everyone's eyes lit up, and after completely stepping out of the forest, a dilapidated street came into view. Usopp, Johnny, and Joseph all looked astonished. The street ground was covered with shocking large pits, as if a colossal creature had trampled all over it. The buildings on both sides also looked as if they had been attacked by wild beasts. Many walls were dented, covered with cracks, and some even had no roofs. There wasn't a single person on the street. Nami glanced at it, her voice heavy. "This is Koza Town, which was attacked by Arlong a few weeks ago. The people in the town didn't pay the tribute money according to the rules, so Arlong personally led his men to kill most of those who resisted and stole all their property. Tribute money. Every one of us, whether adult or child, must buy our right to live from the Arlong Pirates crew with money every month." Usopp's eyes showed fear as he pointed to the surrounding dilapidated buildings, "So the people of this town were all killed because they didn't pay the tribute money?" "Yes, most of them were killed." Nami clenched her fists, her fingernails almost digging into her flesh. "To those fish men, the lives of us, inferior, humans are completely worthless." Everyone fell silent, and a heavy, indignant atmosphere permeated the air. They clearly felt that Nami's hatred for the fish men had long been ingrained in her bones. Only by completely eliminating these fish men could her hatred be alleviated. Ganyu gently took Nami's clenched fist, her palm stroking the back of her hand. "Don't worry, those fish men who don't cherish other people's lives, I promise, not a single one will be spared." Her voice was as calm as ever, but beneath that calmness, everyone felt a chilling, bone-piercing murderous intent that made their hearts tremble. Indeed, this was the first time Ganyu had ever harbored thoughts of killing. When watching the anime, she had always sympathized with Nami's plight and felt indignant about the Arlong Pirates crew's evil deeds. But now, seeing all this firsthand, she realized that they truly weren't human, and what they did wasn't human-like. Compared to Arlong, what Buggy and Kuro did didn't even count as terribly bad deeds. One person also robbed a village, but didn't wantonly slaughter the island's residents. The other, for Kaya's property, only wanted to kill Kaya herself, and didn't even intend to let those pirates destroy the village, as it was a place he would live in later. The actions of both could be considered heinous, but they were nowhere near as inhumane as Arlong's. He regarded the humans of the entire island as mere weeds, often slaughtering an entire small town, the innocent lives lost at his hands probably numbered in the hundreds or thousands. Therefore, he also became the first person Ganyu had ever wanted to kill with her own hands. The perceptive Usopp caught the distinctly cold expression on Ganyu's face, so different from her usual demeanor. His heart suddenly trembled. It's over. Ganyu must be furious. Luffy and Zoro aren't here, no one can stop her, those fishmen are doomed, and this island is doomed too. It's over. Krieg has brought his crew from his ship. They're definitely going to storm our restaurant. What should we do, Boss Zeph? Inside the Bharati restaurant, as the noisy shouts of the Krieg pirates came from the entrance, everyone was in a panic. Zeph was the owner of this restaurant, but most of the people present didn't know his other identity. He was Red Leg. Zeph, who had once led the Cook pirates into the Grand Line, returned unscathed after a year, and was widely renowned in the Grand Line. If it were back in the day, he wouldn't have even bothered with a pirate like Krieg. But now, he was missing a leg, and he had his own restaurant and so many employees, he no longer had the confidence to fight Krieg. Thinking of this, Zeph's gaze swept over Sanji, who was silently smoking beside him, then turned to the only two remaining customers in the hall, Luffy and Zoro. He asked in a calm tone, if I give you this kid now, can you help us deal with this trouble? Huh. Hearing this, Sanji was stunned, his cigarette almost falling to the floor. He widened his eyes, about to jump up and retort. But Luffy stepped forward first, flashing a bright smile. Old man, are you serious? Zeph completely ignored how resistant Sanji was, winked at Luffy, and said, I'll come up with a reasonable excuse to fire him. Then he'll have nowhere to go, and naturally, he'll have to join your ship. Oh. Then it's decided, old man. Luffy's face lit up, and he readily agreed. Zoro, it's time to stretch your body. Zoro immediately stood up, followed behind him, and slowly walked towards the entrance while drawing his sword. Hey. I didn't agree. Sanji was so angry that veins bulged on his forehead. He first pointed at Zeph and cursed him a few times, calling him an old geezer, but his feet seemed to move uncontrollably, and he ultimately followed behind Luffy and Zoro. The chefs and employees remaining in the hall looked at each other, as the three figures gradually walked away. They watched for a long time, then turned to Zeph and asked worriedly. Boss, it's an entire pirate crew, just leaving it to the three of them, will it really be okay? Don't worry, those three are enough. You haven't been to the Grand Line, so you don't know that there are plenty of monsters there who can take on 100 people alone. Zeph's voice remained calm, but a smile of relief flickered in his eyes. Those three boys happened to be just such monsters. The door opened, and a woman with blue hair, a shade deeper than Ganyu's, poked her head out. She immediately saw Nami standing at the front, her face instinctively showing joy. But when her gaze swept over the unfamiliar faces behind Nami, her expression shifted to one of slight aloofness. She crossed her arms, leaned against the doorframe, and asked in a flat tone, Nami, why are you back at this time? Maintaining distance from Nami in front of outsiders was an unspoken understanding among the residents of Kokoyasi village. They all knew Nami was trying to save Kokoyasi village in her own way, so they usually cooperated. Nojiko, let us in first, then we'll talk. Nami also understood this, so she added, they are all partners and friends I met outside, and they are different from Arlong and his crew. Friends from outside. Nojiko paused for a moment, then immediately stepped aside, welcoming Nami, Ganyu, Usopp, Johnny, and Joseph into the yard. The group followed her and Nami, passing through an orange grove, to an old-looking house. Nojiko poured hot tea for them, talking while curiously observing them. Nami, why did you bring them here? The group accepted the tea, politely thanking her. After everyone had settled down, Nami took a deep breath, her gaze firm as she looked at Nojiko and introduced, these are Ganyu and Usopp, they are my true companions now. Nami emphasized the word, true, causing Nojiko to look at Ganyu and Usopp in surprise. She was very surprised that her younger sister, who had endured immense pressure alone since childhood, could find such companions she truly acknowledged, even bringing them back to Kokoyashi village. Bringing them to Kokoyashi village meant Nami was revealing all her past pain and misery to them. This also indirectly showed Nami's extreme trust and reliance on them. Indeed, Nami's next words were, "These two are Johnny and Joseph, two somewhat famous pirate hunters. They, along with Ganyu and Usopp, are here to help us fight Arlong." She chose not to hide from Nojiko what she and her companions were about to do. Nojiko was her closest person, and her hatred for Arlong was no less than Nami's, so telling her would naturally not pose any risk of leakage. Nojiko was stunned for a long while, staring at Nami, as if trying to confirm through her eyes whether she was joking. But it was clear Nami was serious now, there was no hint of a joke in her eyes. "Good, I'll go tell everyone right now to prepare their weapons and attack Fish Man Paradise with you." After confirming Nami was serious, Nojiko abruptly stood up, her emotions agitated, and a long-suppressed fire ignited in her eyes. Not just her, but everyone in Kokoyashi village had been waiting for this day. If they hadn't known Nami was trying to save Kokoyashi village in her own way, the people of Kokoyashi village would have already taken up arms and fought the Fish Man pirates, who had oppressed them for 8 years. "Wait, Nojiko." Nami grabbed her, saying anxiously, "Don't tell everyone. You are no match for those monster fish men, you'll only die in vain if you go. But are we just going to stand by and watch you and your friends fight?" Nojiko stopped, her face filled with unwillingness and worry. She pointed at Nami, then at Ganyu, Usopp, and the others, saying indignantly, "You're only 5 people, but the fish man pirates have dozens, even hundreds, aren't you also just going to die? It's not like that. They're different, not like ordinary people." "What's different? Aren't they all people? Our opponents are a group of fish men." Nami was anxious to explain, but Nojiko clearly wasn't listening, insisting on acting with them. Cough, cough. At this moment, Usopp cleared his throat, interrupting the two sisters who were about to argue. He slowly rose, his hands behind his back, and walked unhurriedly between the two, striking a pose. "Miss Nojiko, it seems you lack some understanding of our Straw Hat Pirates. We are completely different from ordinary people." His voice was loud, with a touch of exaggerated theatricality. "Now, allow me to formally introduce to you, this one behind me." Saying that, he made a dramatic turn, knelt on one knee, palms open, respectfully pointing diagonally at the blue-haired girl who had been quietly sitting and holding a teacup the entire time. The blue-haired girl's expression froze, and she almost choked on the tea she had just sipped. "What the heck, you made such a grand entrance just to introduce me. She is one of the highest combat powers of our Straw Hat Pirates, known as Frost Arrow, Ganyu. Her bounty is as high as 10 million berries." Usopp's voice was impassioned. "Don't mind that her bounty is lower than Arlong's 20 million, bounty isn't necessarily equivalent to strength. Ganyu, she definitely won't be weaker than that guy named Arlong. 10 million berries, her." Nojiko looked in shock at the seemingly harmless blue-haired girl, who was even smaller than her and Nami, her face full of disbelief. "Is this little sister even an adult?" "That's right, Ganyu's bounty is indeed 10 million. If you don't believe it, you can ask Genzo for the latest bounty poster to see." Nami walked behind Ganyu, gently placed her hands on her shoulders, and whispered into her ear. "Ganyu, show her your ability a little bit. Control it, don't make too much noise." "Okay." Ganyu nodded lightly. She thought for a moment, then lowered her eyes, her gaze falling on the teacup in her hand. The teacup contained tea that Nojiko had poured not long ago, still steaming faintly. She slightly parted her small lips and exhaled a wisp of faint cold air. In an instant, the steam above the teacup suddenly vanished, and the tea in the cup solidified into a solid block of ice in the blink of an eye, even the cup walls rapidly covered with a layer of glistening white frost. "This is..." Witnessing this extraordinary scene, Nojiko couldn't help but widen her eyes. Johnny and Joseph gasped, showing even more shock than Nojiko. "A devil fruit user. Big sister Ganyu is actually a devil fruit user. Don't call her big sister Ganyu. Little Ganyu is clearly still very young." Nami scolded the two of them. Ganyu, however, wasn't particularly angry, she was used to it. Besides, these two guys simply couldn't change, and since they were Zoro's subordinates anyway, the blame could just be put on Zoro. Nojiko, the ability Ganyu just used is called a devil fruit ability. In the grand line, only a very few lucky individuals who eat a devil fruit can gain such supernatural power. Nami explained to the still confused Nojiko, Ganyu, and our idiotic captain who hasn't arrived yet, are both devil fruit users. Nojiko nodded, half understanding, and most of her doubts were dispelled. Then she asked, Nami, how many more people are there in your pirate crew who haven't arrived? She roughly understood that Nami had joined a formidable pirate crew on this voyage. Usually, such a pirate crew should have quite a few members. No wonder Nami was so confident. Two. I guess. Hearing this, Nami looked down at Ganyu in front of her. No, it's 3. Ganyu smiled, correcting her. Sanji, he should have joined by now, right? Until I defeat him and become the world's strongest swordsman, I absolutely will not lose again. Do you have any objections? Pirate King. Meanwhile, in another part of the East Blue, in the Sambas Sea, Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji had just endured a fierce battle, jointly defeating the massive Krieg pirates. But not long after, a hawk-eyed man sailed leisurely from the sea in a small boat. Those eyes, sharp as a hawk's, had clearly taken in the battle that had just occurred. Young man, your swordsmanship is quite good. He stared at Zoro for a long time, his voice carrying a hint of imperceptible admiration. However, the moment Zoro saw this man, his muscles suddenly tensed. Under the astonished gazes of everyone, he raised his blood-stained sword. World's strongest swordsman, Hawkeye's Dracula Hawk, I have been waiting for you for a long time. Oh, how did you know I would come today? That's not important. A woman who claimed to know you told me. What's important is that she said you were 100 times stronger than me. Interesting. I don't know the woman you speak of, but I must tell you, the difference between you and me is more than 100-fold. Hey, perfect, I also want to try and see if it's really 100-fold. And so, Pirate Hunter, Zoro and the Warlord of the Sea, Hawk Eyes, Dracula Hawk engaged in a duel of swordsmen on the deck of the ruined dreadnought Saber. The result, well, goes without saying. The Pirate Hunter, who unleashed his three-sword style, Demon Slash, was stopped by a small, palm-sized knife. Zoro's eyes widened instantly, and he suddenly recalled the scene from a day ago. Lest you can't even beat someone with a small knife. It was true. Zoro gritted his teeth, a fire burning in his heart. He refused to truly lose to a small knife, as she had said. For this, he unleashed his strongest killing move at this stage. Three-sword style secret technique, 3000 worlds. This is. Hawkeye's pupils slightly contracted, as if he was impressed by Zoro's technique. He put away the small knife in his hand and drew the black blade, Yuru, one of the supreme grade swords, from his back. You've shown me something very interesting, therefore. I will end you with the etiquette of a swordsman, using this, the world's strongest black blade. Rip. Luffy and Sanji's pupils suddenly dilated, watching the two clash. As two crisp sounds rang out, Zoro's two swords shattered simultaneously, but he stood still, unmoving. After a long time. I lost. Is this the power of the world's strongest? After speaking, Zoro returned the last remaining sword he held in his mouth to its sheath, turned to face Hawk Eyes, and spread his arms. What are you doing? Hawk Eyes asked, puzzled. A wound on the back is a swordsman's shame. Well said. Hawkeye smiled faintly, then drew his sword and struck down. At the doorway of Nami and Nojiko's house, Nami, carrying a large package, stood at the entrance bidding farewell to everyone. According to the plan, I'll take the berries back to Fish Man Paradise first. You all must wait for Luffy and Zoro to arrive before coming out. Yeah. Everyone nodded in unison, watching Nami leave. Only when Nami's skipping figure gradually disappeared from sight did Nojiko turn her head with a smile and say to the others. Would you guys like to have some more drinks? Or, eat a couple of oranges? After learning that the pirate crew Nami was with not only had 2 devil fruit users, but also a powerhouse with a bounty of tens of millions, the heart she had been hanging had already fallen for the most part. To put Nami at ease, she had already decided to completely place her hopes on Nami and her companions, without doing anything unnecessary. After all, if even they couldn't shake Arlong, then even if they gathered the entire village, it would probably only increase casualties. Let's eat oranges. I noticed that orange grove as soon as I came in, they look so good. Usopp said. Those were planted by my and Nami's mother, Belmir. Nojiko led everyone towards the orange grove while recounting, her tone filled with reminiscence. Back then, she barely managed to raise the two of us with the harvest from these orange trees. She skillfully picked a few plump, golden oranges and distributed them to everyone. Ganyu took one, and was just about to peel it herself, when she saw Nojiko neatly peeling a segment and naturally handing it to her lips. Huh. Ganyu was stunned, and met Nojiko's smiling gaze. She then understood her good intentions, and obediently opened her mouth. Ah! The sweet juice burst in her mouth, and Ganyu savored it carefully, unable to help but narrow her eyes. So sweet. It was really sweet, but she didn't know if it was the oranges that were sweet, or if it was because a beautiful woman was feeding her. If it's sweet, eat a few more. Nami also loved to eat oranges when she was little, just as cute as you. Nojiko reached out and rubbed Ganyu's head, even touching the little horn on top of her head. Quote! Ganyu's body trembled, and a strange tingling sensation came from the tip of her horn. She subconsciously shrunk her neck, covered her horns with her hands, and her cheeks flushed slightly. Nojiko, I'm actually much older than I look. She realized that Nojiko seemed to be treating her like a little sister who needed care, which made her feel a little helpless. Nojiko was at most 20 years old, and Nami was only 18. And she, before transmigrating, was a 21 or 2-year-old college student, and this body was already a young girl over 4,000 years old. Therefore, whether it was Nami or Nojiko, they were the little sisters in front of her. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, a knock on the door rang out. Nojiko frowned and shouted towards the door, "Who is it?" "It's me." A deep male voice came. "Uncle Genzo." Nojiko's expression relaxed, and she introduced Genzo to Ganyu and the others. Genzo was the policeman of Kokoyashi village, and he had been withstanding the pressure of the Arlong pirates for many years. After opening the door, standing there was a middle-aged man wearing a windmill hat and a somewhat old but clean police uniform, with obvious anxiety on his face. "Nojiko, a marine warship has come to attack the Arlong pirates, you remind Nami." Halfway through his words, Genzo was suddenly stunned, seeing that there were so many people beside Nojiko. They are friends Nami met outside, they came here to help Nami. Nojiko quickly introduced. "Hello, I am Ganyu, Nami's companion." Ganyu politely greeted and gave a concise and ordinary self-introduction. But the remaining three were not simple. "I am Captain Usopp with 8,000 subordinates, it is a pleasure to meet you. I am Johnny, this is my brother Joseph, he and I are the strongest bounty hunter duo, this time we are here to take Arlong's head." Genzo was momentarily speechless by these successive, bold statements, and opened his mouth, forgetting what he originally wanted to say. Where did these audacious fellows come from? Ganyu was a little helpless. These three have problems with their brains, ignore them, you can tell me and Nojiko if you have something to say. Oh, okay. Genzo was influenced by Ganyu's calm aura, and actually seemed to have forgotten what he had just heard, his face returning to anxiety. A marine warship suddenly appeared and is bombarding Arlong Park. I just saw Nami heading in that direction, it's too dangerous for her to be there now. Marine. Nojiko's expression changed, and she immediately became worried. Why at this time? She was a little troubled. They had just discussed a plan to deal with Arlong pirates' crew, but at this time a group of marines suddenly appeared. Ganyu pondered for a moment, quickly searching her mind for memories of the original work, but it was a bit vague. She forgot whether there was this group of marines in the original work, but even if there was, this group of marines definitely failed to break through Fishman Paradise in the end, and was likely dealt with by Arlong pirates' crew. Therefore, Uncle Genzo, take us to the beach to take a look first. Ganyu said calmly. Genzo hesitated a little, he felt it would be dangerous to take such a little girl. Take us there, Uncle Genzo, they are all very powerful, they are helpers that Nami brought back from the outer sea. Nojiko said. Okay, follow me. Genzo glanced at Usopp, Johnny, and Joseph, feeling that the three people who had just boasted should have something, so he nodded and agreed. A few minutes later, the group arrived at the coast. They saw a marine warship with a seagull flag sailing closer, the cannons on the side of the ship spewing flames from time to time, firing shells at the uniquely shaped Arlong Park in the distance, explosions resounding on the water and buildings. There really are Marines coming to wipe them out. Doesn't that mean we're not needed? Usopp said in surprise. Nojiko watched for a while and shook her head. In these years, there has been no shortage of Marines coming to attack the Arlong pirates, but none have succeeded so far. Nani, are they that powerful? Usopp said in disbelief. You will soon understand. Nojiko said no more, her eyes looking towards the fish-man paradise, as if searching for Nami's figure. At the same time, on the deck of the marine warship, a marine officer wearing a Justice coat was passionately mobilizing his subordinates before the battle. Our mission this time is to go to Gosa village, which was destroyed by Arlong pirates' crew, rescue the surviving villagers, and take them away from here safely. Speaking excitedly, he even pulled out the saber at his waist, the tip of the sword pointing directly at the direction of Fish-Man Paradise, his voice suddenly rising. Although, that's what I think. But witnessing these pirates wantonly occupying residential villages, yet turning a blind eye, does our sense of justice allow us to do this? No. The marine soldiers were filled with righteous indignation, roaring in unison. Good. Continue to launch a cannon attack on Fish-Man Paradise. Be careful, don't let them enter the water, these guys' combat power will double in the water. The marine officer ordered loudly. In the center of Fish-Man Paradise. A blue-skinned fishman with a jagged long nose, sitting on the highest seat, remotely watched the marine warship that was getting closer and closer. Arlong, it has been confirmed with Captain Nezumi that the person who came is the Marine of the 77th branch, not under his jurisdiction. A fishman stepped forward and reported the information just obtained through the Den Den Mushi. Oh, not under his jurisdiction. Arlong's mouth cracked into a ferocious smile, his jagged teeth gleaming coldly. That is to say, we can let go and have a big fight. He glanced around at his subordinates who were eager to try, his eyes locking on three fishmen whose auras were obviously stronger. Hachi, Karubi, Chu. The three of you will take action and tear this marine warship to pieces for me. Yes, Arlong. Hearing this, an octopus fishman with 6 arms, a sturdy ray fishman, and a kissing fishman with protruding lips stepped forward. Wow. The 3 executives are taking action at the same time, it must be a spectacular battle. As long as they can get into the water, that ship probably won't last even 3 minutes. The fishman crowd boiled, looking forward to the performance of their Arlong Pirates crew's 3 executives. And in a corner of the fishman, an out-of-place orange-haired girl watched the scene on the sea with a calm expression. Boom. The Navy battleship's cannons roared again, and cannonballs, like meteors, slammed into the Arlong Park coastline. Although they didn't directly hit the fishmen, the flying debris and shockwaves still destroyed several houses where the fishmen lived, raising large clouds of smoke. You lowly humans, how dare you destroy my house? Chu, one of the 3 cadres, the kissing fish man whose lips protruded like cannon barrels, instantly felt rage surge when he saw his dwelling destroyed. He rushed to the shore with astonishing speed, leapt, and, plop, plunged into the seawater. Gurgle gurgle gurgle. An unusually violent sound of water being sucked, as if a giant whale was drinking, came from under the water. After only a few seconds, Chu suddenly poked his head out from under the sea surface. His 2 gills were now swollen like 2 giant spherical water sacs, his skin stretched transparent, vaguely revealing the water squeezed to its limit within. Water shotgun. Bang 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 bang. Dull thuds, like heavy hammers beating drums, erupted one after another. Several high-pressure water jets, like cannonballs leaving a barrel, tore through the air, carrying a sharp whistling sound, and shot directly towards the Navy battleship deck a dozen meters away. Ah! Cough. Several Navy soldiers who were loading cannonballs were caught off guard and hit hard in the chest by the water jets. The impact was no less than that of a solid cannonball. Their chests immediately caved in, they spat blood, their eyes unfocused, and they collapsed to the ground. Only the officer in the Justice coat reacted swiftly, timely swinging his saber and blocking the water jet aimed at him with the flat of his blade. With a loud clang, his arm felt slightly numb, and he had to step back half a pace to dissipate the force, his gaze becoming extremely solemn. Turn the cannons towards this fish man. We absolutely cannot let him launch another attack like that. He ordered with a wave of his saber. Yes. Immediately, several more Navy soldiers rushed to the gun positions, skillfully loading heavy cannonballs into the breeches. However, when they forcefully pulled the breech block, the expected roar did not occur. The gun turret was unresponsive, like a misfired iron lump. What's going on? Why can't it fire? The Navy soldiers operating the gun turret checked in a panic, their faces full of alarm. What's going on? The Navy officer frowned and took a few steps to the nearest gun turret, preparing to inspect it himself. Just then. It's useless, all your gun turrets have been completely hollowed out by me from below. A voice full of mockery came from below the ship's side. The faces of the Navy on the deck changed drastically, and they looked down, following the sound. They saw. A fish man in a karate gi was easily clinging to the outside of the ship's hull with one hand. In his other hand, he was holding a transmission rod, clearly just disassembled from inside a gun turret and stained with seawater. He was none other than Karubi, one of the 3 fish man cadres, who, taking advantage of Chu attracting all the firepower, had snuck in from the bottom of the ship and destroyed the core components of all the gun turrets on the battleship. Open fire. Shoot him through. The Navy officer roared in fury, veins bulging on his forehead. Without cannons, they still had rifles. At such close range, a dense barrage of bullets would be enough to turn this arrogant fish man into a sieve. However, facing the dozens of dark muzzles instantly pointed at him, Karubi not only showed no fear but revealed an even more mocking smile. He extended a finger, pointing to the other side of the battleship. Are you really not going to run for your lives? Ah! A wild roar came from the other side of the sea. Immediately afterward, to the horrified gaze of the Navy, the sea surface churned violently. They saw Hachi, the octopus fish man among the 3 cadres, using his 6 incredibly strong arms to lift a massive rock reef, comparable to a small hill, directly from the seabed. What does he want to do? The Navy officer's pupils suddenly constricted, unsure what this superhumanly strong fish man intended to do. As a Navy, you couldn't possibly not know, could you? Karubi said with a playful tone. What will happen if such a huge obstacle is thrown into the center of a rapid current? As soon as he finished speaking, Hachi let out another roar. All 6 arms exerted force simultaneously, throwing the massive rock reef violently towards the center of the current not far from the battleship's front side. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The next moment, with the rock reef's sinking point as the center, the surrounding seawater seemed to be frantically stirred by an invisible giant hand, beginning to violently spin and surge. In just a short while, a massive and incredibly powerful whirlpool had already formed, and it was rapidly expanding at a visible rate. A whirlpool, it's a whirlpool. A drop of cold sweat appeared on the Navy officer's temple, and he shouted with all his might. Quick! Hard to starboard! Full power! Escape this sea area. Otherwise, we'll all be sucked in. Ha ha ha, it's too late. A whirlpool isn't that easy to escape. The 3 fish man cadres laughed loudly. No matter how sturdy a battleship, it couldn't withstand the destruction of a whirlpool. Once inside, without exception, there was only a dead end. On the shore. It's over, these Navy are doomed. Usopp, who had watched the entire battle, covered his face with his hands and said in horror. It was strange, although he himself was a pirate, he had just hoped that this group of Navy would win. But there was no helping it, just as Nojiko had said, this group of fish man pirates was not that easy to deal with. At least not in the water, it seemed they could only attack them from land after Luffy and Zoro arrived. Usopp was using the Navy's failure to ponder the precautions needed when they attacked Fishman Paradise. Suddenly, a bone-chilling coldness spread without warning, the ambient air temperature plummeted, and even his exhaled breath instantly condensed into white mist. This feeling, it's very familiar. Ganyu. Usopp suddenly realized something and abruptly turned his head. He saw that the blue-haired girl, who had been standing quietly behind him, had now, at some unknown moment, drawn a longbow. This ancient-looking longbow, glowing with a soft blue light, was held steadily in her hand, with freezing cold currents swirling around both the bowstring and her body. Her icy blue hair fluttered with her clothes, and her red and purple eyes became incredibly focused and stern. Celestial. Shower. The girl's lips parted slightly, and the moment her clear, cold voice entered everyone's ears, with a whoosh, the 2 fingers gripping the bowstring suddenly released. An ice arrow shot from the string, piercing the air, streaking across the sky like a meteor, whistling towards the center of the sea. Nojiko, Genzo, Johnny, and Joseph all held their breath, their eyes wide, staring in disbelief at the scene before them. They didn't understand why Ganyu would suddenly shoot such an astonishing arrow at this moment. Was she trying to help those Navy fight the fish men? But if she really wanted to help, why wait until the Navy battleship was about to be swallowed by the whirlpool, with everyone's lives hanging by a thread, to act? Even if she hit one of the fishmen now, it might not be enough to turn the tide, right? Soon, their questions were answered. The ice crystal arrow, released from the string, cut through the sky. Its target was not any single fish man, but the massive, furiously spinning whirlpool itself. On the marine warship, the hull violently tilted and spun under an irresistible suction. Everyone on deck lost their footing, despairingly watching the center of the whirlpool, like the mouth of a giant beast, getting closer and closer. There was no hope. In the face of nature's power, the individual's role seemed so insignificant, including the marine officer. Everyone could only watch as death approached. However, death did not arrive as expected. A dense, crisp sound, like ice rapidly spreading, suddenly rang out, overpowering the surging whirlpool. The temperature abruptly dropped, and the ship gradually stopped its downward trend. Finally, it eerily stopped in the middle of the sea, as if frozen. What is this? The marine officer, who first noticed the anomaly, looked up blankly, surveying his surroundings. The scene before him completely robbed him of his ability to think. All around was a vast expanse of white snow, no whirlpool was to be seen, even all the seawater had solidified into a single sheet of ice. He remained stunned for a while. Admiral Aokiji. A look of wild joy suddenly appeared on the marine officer's face, and he couldn't help but shout. He subconsciously believed that only one person in the entire world could perform such a miracle, instantly freezing the sea surface and the whirlpool. The Marine Headquarters' highest combat power, the Admiral with the Ice Fruit ability, Aokiji Kuzan. Only he had the ability to freeze the sea surface. Nani. The Admiral has come to save us. Really? Is it Admiral Aokiji? Oh my god. We're saved. It's the Admiral. The Marines, who had just escaped mortal danger, cried tears of joy. What's going on? I can't move. My body is frozen. How could the seawater suddenly freeze? In stark contrast to the ecstatic Marines, Kurubi, Chu, and Hachi discovered in horror that their lower bodies were completely trapped in the suddenly formed thick ice, making it difficult to escape for a while. What? Is it really that guy Aokiji? In Fish-Man Paradise, Arlong stumbled, almost falling from his throne. He scanned the sea ahead with a terrified expression, searching for the figure he had once seen in the newspapers. Just hearing the name, immense fear made his hands tremble uncontrollably, his nails digging into his palms without him realizing it. An admiral. The humiliating scene from years ago, when he was with the Sun Pirates and was casually crushed by a marine powerhouse, utterly helpless, uncontrollably flashed through his mind. If he remembered correctly, that guy was also an admiral now. Nami took in Arlong's reaction, observing him with a cold gaze. So you can tremble in fear too. She didn't know what an admiral was, nor did she know who Aokiji was, the one who made Arlong tremble with fear just by hearing his name. But she knew very well that this suddenly frozen sea surface was definitely not the work of some admiral. Instead, it was her companion. With several crisp cracks, Kurubi, Chu, and Hachi finally shattered the ice trapping them, relying on the fish man's powerful strength. They stood on the ice, exchanged surprised glances, and then uniformly directed their gaze towards the marine warship. Although I don't know what happened, let's complete Big Brother Arlong's mission first. That's right. It's just a ship full of frozen Marines, the three of us together can still kill them all. The three discussed for a bit, preparing to attack the warship. Wait. The three of you, get back here immediately. Let them go. Arlong's urgent voice came from the heights of Fish-Man Paradise, abruptly stopping the three in their tracks. Big Brother Arlong. Why? Now is a good opportunity to get rid of them. The three cadres looked bewildered, turning to look at Arlong on the heights. Arlong was so angry he almost ground his teeth, these three idiots. They still had no idea that Marine's highest combat power, Admiral Aokiji, was very likely nearby. Attacking the Marines at this time would be seeking death, wouldn't it? His face alternated between green and pale, his gaze vigilantly sweeping his surroundings, but he never found any suspected presence of Admiral Aokiji. But he still dared not kill these Marines, roaring his command. If I tell you to come back, then come back quickly. Don't you understand my words? Ah. Yes, Big Brother Arlong. Seeing their boss so enraged, the three fish-man cadres, though unwilling, could only reluctantly stop. Chu glanced at the Marines with a cruel expression, leaving a menacing remark. Consider yourselves lucky. Big Brother Arlong is in a good mood today, so he's letting you off. Get lost. The Marines were equally perplexed. Admiral Aokiji, who had saved their lives, did not appear, seemingly not wanting to meet them. Could it be that the Admiral thinks we can't even deal with a group of fishmen, and it's too embarrassing for the Marines, so he doesn't want to show his face? Idiot. What nonsense. How could Admiral San have such a thought? He must have a more important mission. Cough cough. For now, let's retreat, repair the ship when we get back, and then return to wipe out this group of fishman pirates. Yes. Some of the Marines disembarked, while those on board remained on guard to prevent another fishman attack. Those below began pushing the ship, slowly moving it from the ice surface towards the seawater. Not long after, the Marines sailed away from this sea area in their warship. All the fishmen also retreated into fishman paradise, like startled birds, tightly closing the gate, as if guarding against some terrifying presence that might appear at any moment. On the other side, at a hidden coastal inlet, everyone gazed at a blue-haired girl with eyes full of shock. Among them, Genzo and Nojiko looked at her almost as if she were a monster. It was no wonder they were so shocked. They had never even heard of such a thing as freezing an entire ocean with a single arrow in storybooks. Ganyu, how did you do that? After a long silence, Nojiko couldn't help but ask. She knew that Nami's confidence in confronting Arlong this time was definitely because her helping companion was very powerful. But she had absolutely not expected this level of power. I know. Usopp raised his hand, his eyes shining with almost fanatical admiration. Ganyu, just now, she shot an arrow right into the center of the whirlpool, and then, the cold spread from the inside out, instantly freezing the sea surface within a radius of more than 10 meters. As a sniper, Usopp's eyesight far surpassed that of ordinary people, which allowed him to understand the terrifying nature of Ganyu's arrow even more clearly. The arrow traveled from the coastal inlet nearly 1,000 meters away to the Fishman Paradise Sea area, and precisely hit the exact center of the whirlpool. What an exaggerated display of power and accuracy. If Zoro's target, Hawkeye, was the world's strongest swordsman, then in Usopp's heart at this moment, Ganyu was undoubtedly the world's strongest sniper. Even more exaggerated is directly freezing the sea, right? This is exactly like what the newspapers say about Marine Admiral Aokiji. Big Sister Ganyu, you are truly amazing. Johnny and Joseph exclaimed with heartfelt admiration. Aokiji. Usopp was startled, remembering the Marines had also shouted that name earlier. He's the Marines' highest combat power, one of the three admirals, the Ice Fruit ability user, Aokiji. Johnny explained. As well-informed pirate hunters, they had some understanding of both the warlords and the admirals. It is said that he can freeze an entire ocean. Before, I thought the rumors were exaggerated, but now that I've seen Big Sister Ganyu, I completely believe it. Oh. Usopp suddenly understood, then looked at Ganyu and exclaimed, does that mean Ganyu is already as powerful as an admiral? How could that be? Johnny shook his head, saying with a slightly regretful but confident tone, even though Big Sister Ganyu is very powerful, she's still so young, she definitely can't compare to an admiral. Right, but I think Big Sister Ganyu has the potential to become that kind of powerhouse. Perhaps when you guys enter the Grand Line, she really can grow into that kind of powerhouse, Joseph said excitedly. He was already fantasizing about the days when this pirate crew, comprised of their big brother, Pirate Hunter, Zoro, the captain, the Gum Fruit Rubber Fruit user Straw Hat Luffy, and Frost Arrow, Ganyu, would shine brightly in the Grand Line. To the side. Ganyu ignored these noisy guys, her gaze calmly fixed on the distant sea horizon. She saw a small boat, with 3 men on it. They were the one with the straw hat, the green-haired one, and the yellow-haired one. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. They've finally arrived. Ganyu smiled faintly, then raised her bow and arrow again, drew the bow, and aimed. Her target was the cigarette Sanji held in his mouth. Swish. The arrow shot out again, crossing 1,000 meters in an instant, precisely hitting its target. On the small boat, Sanji, who was lying on his side smoking, only felt a faint flash of light before his eyes, and a strange chill swept past his lips. He subconsciously touched his lips, then froze. Huh. Where's my cigarette? Kokoyashi village. Inside the old house where Nojiko and Nami had lived since childhood. Nojiko, Genzo, Johnny, and Joseph, along with Ganyu and Usopp of the Straw Hat, and the newly arrived Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, a total of 9 people, gathered together. The house was quite large, about several dozen square meters, much bigger than the meeting hall on the Going Merry. Everyone sat around a long dining table, discussing the subsequent attack on Fishman Paradise. Nami went to the Fishman's base camp, alone. Luffy interlaced his fingers, resting his chin on the back of his hand, his distinct black and white eyes wide open. Seriously. Who told her to do such a superfluous thing? Upon learning that Nami had returned to Fishman Paradise alone to act as an inside agent, Luffy immediately appeared resistant. Zoro and Sanji's reactions were almost identical to his, they also frowned. Such an action did not align with their style of doing things. Hey, Luffy, you can't put it that way. Usopp tried to defend Nami. Nami did this for our own good. With her as an inside agent, our chances of defeating the Arlong Pirates crew are much greater. There's no need for that at all. She just needed to wait here for me to punch that Arlong away. Luffy slammed the table, looking somewhat angry. Ganyu frowned slightly, looking at the fuming Luffy with a hint of surprise. In her impression, Luffy shouldn't get angry so easily. This meant that something must have affected him. Ganyu pondered for a moment and then understood. Nami's courageous act, in another sense, was actually a distrust of Luffy as a captain. She didn't trust that all problems would be solved once Luffy arrived, which was why she took action herself. Of course, there was an even more important point. Although Luffy didn't say it, his words revealed his concern for Nami's personal safety. As a navigator with almost no combat power, staying within the Fishman Pirates, surrounded by wolves, was always risky. And she could have avoided this risk. After a long while, Luffy suddenly stood up. We're leaving now to punch that fool fish man who's preventing Nami from going out to sea. Now, aren't we waiting until the evening banquet for a pincer attack from inside and out? Usopp asked weakly. According to Nami's plan, the best time would be during the celebration banquet at night. After she used sleeping medicine to knock out a large number of fish men, the Straw Hat would launch a surprise attack and defeat Arlong in one fell swoop. But it was only early afternoon, still several hours until nightfall. Luffy shook his head vigorously, his attitude unwavering. No more waiting. I can't just stay here and do nothing. But Luffy, wouldn't that be too? Usopp tried to persuade him further, but he was pushed down by 2 hands simultaneously. It was Sanji and Zoro. The two exchanged glances, seemingly surprised by each other's actions. Soon, Zoro spoke first. Since we've already landed on the island, this is a war between 2 pirate crews. A pirate crew's war should defeat the opponent in an honorable way. Sanji, on the other hand, spoke from a completely different stance. What's the point of an advantage gained at the cost of a lady's safety? What we should do now is rush to Arlong Park immediately and ensure Miss Nami's safety. One was considering from the perspective of a pirate crew, while the other was simply concerned for Nami's personal safety. After these two spoke, the people present naturally had no other opinions. Even Nojiko and Genzo couldn't help but nod secretly, sighing that Nami had indeed joined an extraordinary pirate crew. Alright, since it's all decided, then. Luffy's gaze swept around, finally landing on a blue-haired girl. Ganyu, how do you think we should fight? Ganyu was also used to acting as the external brain for this reckless captain, and she immediately said. It's simple. The Arlong Pirates have about 50 members. The 3 main cadres will be dealt with by me, Zoro, and Sanji respectively. Arlong will be handled by Luffy himself. The remaining fish man goons will, of course, be left to At this point, everyone's eyes collectively turned to Usopp. Me. Usopp, seeing everyone looking at him, immediately waved his hands in panic, me against dozens of fishmen alone. How is that possible? No, no, change people. Alright. Ganyu pursed her lips and smiled slyly, then I'll switch with you. All the fish-man goons will be left to me, and you go deal with one of the fish-man cadres. What? Usopp was struck as if by lightning. He had just witnessed how powerful those fish-man cadres were, even a warship almost fell into their hands. How could he possibly be an opponent for such strong individuals? It's okay, brother Usopp, you still have us. With you and our strongest bounty hunter duo, you can definitely defeat a cadre. Johnny and Joseph patted their chests, saying confidently. Oh. Usopp looked at these two subordinates of Zoro and suddenly felt a little tempted. 3 against 1, surely there should be some chance of winning, right? And these two guys always claimed to be the strongest bounty hunters, so they must have some strength. After a moment of hesitation, he finally nodded, alright. Inside Arlong Park. Brother Arlong, I just asked Captain Nezumi, and he said he hadn't received any news of an admiral coming to the East Blue. He said we most likely recognized the wrong person. A fish man reported the call message to Arlong. Recognized the wrong person. Arlong frowned deeply upon hearing this, thought for a moment, and felt that Captain Nezumi's words made sense. Admiral, was an important combat force used by the Marine government to contend with the 7 warlords of the sea, and the pirate, 4 emperors. Such a big shot wouldn't idly come to the East Blue, known as the weakest of the 4 seas. Moreover, if Admiral Aokiji was really on this island, why didn't he act earlier to eliminate all of them? He himself knew how many evil deeds he had committed on this island over the past nearly 8 years. HMPH, it's probably those Marines who used some method we don't know to freeze the sea, then lied that an admiral had acted, scaring us into not pursuing, which allowed them to escape. The fish-man Kadri Chu analyzed, his tone very displeased. It must be. Brother Arlong shouldn't have stopped us then, that group of Marines would have been dead for sure. The fish-man Kadri Karubi also said from the side. The fishmen below followed suit, all believing it was a pity to let those Marines escape. Forget it, tell the brothers to lower their guard. Arlong, seeing the situation, waved his hand, deciding not to dwell on the admiral matter anymore. Then his gaze slowly turned to the orange-haired girl in the corner of the fish-man group, saying meaningfully. Prepare, for our navigator miss, who once again brought back 10 million berries. Let's have a party to celebrate. The fishmen immediately erupted, shouting excitedly. Party. Nami looked at the lively scene, forced a happy smile, and clapped her hands, saying. Since it's a party for me, let me prepare the fine wine for everyone. What? Did I hear that right? Arlong feigned surprise. Navigator Miss is actually going to pour wine for us herself today. Wow. The cheers of the fishmen grew louder. Even by their fishman aesthetics, Nami was an impeccable beautiful girl. Having such a beautiful girl personally pour wine naturally made them happy. A bunch of scum, Nami calmly watched the group of fishmen, her heart filled with extreme disgust, but for the sake of the plan, she still forced a smile, picked up the wine pot that had already been laced with sleeping medicine, and poured wine for the fishmen one by one. Watching them happily accept the wine bowls, Nami also truly smiled. Just wait, if you just drink a few more cups, you'll all be sprawled on the ground, unable to get up. Nami, why aren't you pouring me a cup too? I'm the captain who watched you grow up and took good care of you. Arlong's voice came from above. Hearing this, Nami quickly turned around, picked up the wine pot, and walked towards Arlong, about to pour him a special cup of wine. But at this moment, a thunderous boom suddenly came from outside the door. Boom. As if hit by a cannon, one of the park's walls exploded. Debris splattered like rain, raising a cloud of dust that obscured vision. Faintly, the outlines of several figures could be seen walking out from the smoke. Walking at the very front, the silhouette of a person wearing a straw hat stepped onto a raised stone on the ground and shouted loudly. Arlong. Get out here. Hearing this, all the fishmen in Fishman Paradise gradually realized that a group of humans had come to stir up trouble. Arlong narrowed his long, fish-like eyes, observing the figures in the dust. They weren't wearing marine coats with the word justice, nor were any of them particularly tall, which meant it wasn't the admiral he was most worried about. Secretly relieved, Arlong leaned back in his chair and said nonchalantly, "Who are you people?" It was just a few humans coming to provoke him, he didn't really care. In the East Blue, he had never encountered a strong person of his own caliber. Clatter. The sake pot in Nami's hand fell to the ground, and the sake spread across the floor. Her expression was stunned as she watched the figures gradually become clear, her eyes a mix of surprise and panic. How did they come early? What exactly was going on? Didn't Ganyu tell them her plan? Arlong glanced at her and asked with interest, "Do you know them?" No, Nami's heart was in a chaotic mess, and she didn't know how to respond. Of course she knows us, she's my navigator. Below, the voice that had just cursed Arlong to get out rang out again, this time with a hint of pride. Nami's expression instantly stiffened, almost crying out in alarm. Luffy, that idiot, what nonsense was he spouting? But there was still a chance to salvage the situation. Nami adjusted her expression, forcing herself to regain her usual coldness. I don't know them, and I haven't joined any other pirate crew. Hey, Arlong sneered, his eyes full of mockery, they've already come to your doorstep, do you think I'll still believe you? He didn't seem surprised by Nami's betrayal, as if he had long anticipated this day would come. Brother Arlong, I've said it before, humans can't be trusted, you should have killed her long ago. Kurubi said coldly, taking 2 steps towards Nami, seemingly ready to make a move against her. You, what are you doing? Don't forget, I have your crew's mark on my arm. Nami took a few steps back, raised her left arm, revealing the blue tattoo. As she spoke, she kept giving glances downwards, signaling her companions to leave first. But the few people below, for some unknown reason, seemed not to notice, showing no reaction at all. Mark. Another fish man Kadri, Chu, sneered and flanked her from the other side. Don't be naive, even with this mark, you'll always just be a lowly human. Nami's face darkened, but it wasn't because she was hurt by Chu's heartless words. She was just worried that most of the fishmen present hadn't drunk the sleeping potion, and it might be very disadvantageous for her companions to fight them now. But in Arlong's eyes, he thought she was scared, and he stood up to stop the 2 of them. Hey, don't actually kill our surveyor, miss. If she dies, who will draw our future sea charts? For him, Nami's greatest use was drawing sea charts. If we don't kill her, then breaking her 2 legs is acceptable, right? Kurubi asked. Arlong pretended to think for a few seconds, then bared his sharp-toothed mouth and let out his characteristic, shahahaha, maniacal laugh. That's a good idea. With her legs broken, she can stay in her room obediently and focus on drawing sea charts for us. At his laugh, the entire Arlong Park erupted in deafening laughter. All the fishmen stared at the human girl who had lived with them for 8 years with playful and cruel gazes, without a trace of pity in their eyes. Amidst the harsh taunts, Nami also seemed affected. She slowly lowered her head, her orange bangs covering her expression. Only the occasional teardrops falling to the ground seemed to tell everyone of the girl's sadness and despair. The oppressive silence lasted for a moment, then her voice, clearly choked and trembling, softly rang out, as if she had used her last ounce of strength. Arlong, you promised me, that as long as I gathered 100 million berries, I could buy Kokoyasi village from you. Was that promise also a lie? Ah, you mean that? Arlong exaggeratedly scratched the back of his head, then burst into cruel laughter again. Of course it was a lie. Even if you really could gather 100 million berries, I have plenty of ways to take it all away. He leaned closer and continued in a malicious tone. After all, as long as you can't produce 100 million berries, it doesn't count as me breaking my promise. Shahahahahahaha. Arlong's laughter echoed through the park, as he smugly admired Nami's lowered head and trembling shoulders. For him, nothing was more pleasurable than witnessing human despair firsthand. On the Grand Line, all the humiliation humans had inflicted upon fishmen, he would return it tenfold in the East Blue. But this was far from enough. His true ambition was to establish a fish-man kingdom in the East Blue, a place where fishmen would be supreme, and all humans would be their slaves, so that's how it is. Suddenly, a voice devoid of emotion came from in front of him. Arlong's expression stiffened, and he stared in surprise at the orange-haired girl who had suddenly raised her head. He saw that although her face bore tear stains, there was not an ounce of despair. There was only pure hatred and disgust. Just like the expressions of those human powerhouses on the Grand Line who used to look at him. Arlong. Nami said expressionlessly, in a cold, mocking tone he had never heard before. One of my companions mentioned that you, in the past, seemed to be the slave of the humans you most detested. She deliberately emphasized the last two words, then tilted her head slightly and smiled. That feeling must have been terrible, wasn't it? No sooner had she spoken than Arlong, who had just been mocking others, instantly changed his expression by 180 degrees. You, how dare you? As if his deepest, most shameful, most desperate memories had been stirred, Arlong trembled all over, his face turning extremely ugly, his voice almost squeezed out through gritted teeth, word by word. Not only him, but the several fish-man cadres beside him, and the numerous fish-man minions below, all had their arrogance and playfulness vanish without a trace at this moment. Some of them hadn't shared Arlong's experiences, but they all knew that it was the past sorrow of the fish-men, Arlong's taboo. No one dared to bring up that past in front of Arlong. Looking at the mocking smile on the girl's face, Arlong felt as if he had returned to the humiliating days of being a slave. Endless shame and fury completely overwhelmed his reason. Die. Arlong's face was as grim as a demon's, and he let out a heartbreaking roar, a muscular arm tearing through the air, swinging towards Nami's head, which was within arm's reach. He used almost all his strength in this strike. His physical capabilities, tens of times that of a human, were enough to shatter rock. Bang! An extremely violent impact sound rang out in front of Nami. But unexpectedly, Nami was not smashed into a pile of shattered corpses by the enraged Arlong as imagined. A hand, which had appeared at some unknown time, like the strongest iron clamp, firmly gripped Arlong's disproportionately thick wrist. No matter how Arlong's face turned purple from exertion, or how his muscles bulged and flexed, he couldn't break free from that hand. Nami stood safely behind that person, her face no longer showing cold mockery, but rather a brilliant smile of relief, emotion, and happiness. Nami. The Straw Hat Boy stood with his back to her, his voice not loud, but carrying an undeniable firmness that spread throughout the suddenly silent fish-man paradise. Running around causing trouble on another pirate crew's territory by yourself, I will be very displeased. No. No way. He actually blocked Big Brother Arlong's full power attack. That kid is clearly a human. How can a human have such strength? Wait, did any of you see clearly? How did he suddenly appear there just now? The fish-man crowd watching below was in an uproar, with waves of startled and uncertain discussions. Having been in the East Blue for 8 years, they had never encountered a human who could withstand Arlong's attacks. Especially not Arlong when he was clearly in a state of rage. Arlong only felt his arm being gripped by an iron vice. Despite using all his strength, he couldn't break free from that hand. Kid, who are you? He stared intently at the Straw Hat Boy in front of him, his chest heaving violently with anger. However, Luffy did not answer him. He merely glanced at Arlong, then turned his head slightly, his gaze from under the straw hat falling upon the orange-haired girl behind him, watching for a few seconds. Nami, tell him, Luffy said in a low voice. His meaning was clear, this question, it was only right for her to declare the answer. Nami met Luffy's gaze, first startled, not understanding why she had to be the one to answer. But gradually, she saw an unprecedented resolve in the Straw Hat Boy's eyes. So, that's what he meant. Nami felt a little helpless, she pondered for a moment, then raised her head and looked directly into Arlong's eyes. At this moment, her eyes shimmered with an unprecedented light, and in a clear, loud voice, loud enough for every corner of the entire fish-man paradise to hear distinctly, she declared. His name is Monkey D. Luffy. He is my companion. He is the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. He is the man who will become the Pirate King. As she spoke, she extended her finger, pointing directly at the pale-faced Arlong, her voice rising another notch. And today, he will personally defeat you and your Arlong pirates here. Her voice was impassioned, her tone devoid of any hesitation or doubt, like a muffled thunderclap exploding in the hearts of every fish man. They all turned their gaze to the Straw Hat Boy and the few intruders. This group of people, they really came to help Nami fight them. Luffy's lips finally couldn't help but curl upwards. What he had been waiting for was Nami to say those words herself. He turned around, grabbed the straw hat from his head, and placed it firmly on the orange-haired girl's head behind him, then said, Nami, you just watch here. We will definitely get rid of all these fish men for you, not a single one will be left. You ignorant brat. Die. How could Arlong endure such repeated humiliation? The moment Luffy turned around, Arlong's arm, which had been hanging behind him, suddenly shot up. A seemingly ordinary drop of water had condensed in his palm at some point. To humans, it was just an ordinary drop of water, but in the hands of a fish man like Arlong, it could transform into a weapon sharper than a blade. Whoosh! The water drop tore through the air, emitting a bullet-like shriek, and shot directly at Luffy's back of the head with speed invisible to the naked eye. If he were truly hit in the head by that single drop of water, even if he wasn't killed instantly, he would lose most of his combat ability. The distance between them was so close, and Arlong executed this move with lightning speed. Logically, even Luffy wouldn't be able to react in time. However, just a split second before Arlong made his move, Luffy's head, as if with prescience, tilted slightly to the side. It was this subtle movement, by mere millimeters, that caused the deadly water drop to narrowly graze his cheek as it flew past. It finally shot into the ground behind him, exploding with a boom into a shocking large crater. Luffy, are you alright? Nami anxiously looked at Luffy, wanting to go forward and check if he was injured. I'm fine, Nami. Luffy waved his hand, stopping Nami from approaching. How could you? Arlong, on the other hand, widened his eyes, his face full of horror, staring in disbelief at the uninjured Straw Hat Boy. Because he clearly saw that in that lightning-fast instant, the Straw Hat actually had his eyes closed. That was close. Luffy slowly opened his eyes, unconsciously touching his chest, as if savoring that strange state. I almost got hit. Just now. His body instinctively sensed a fatal crisis. He inexplicably recalled the method Ganyu had taught him not long ago, when facing 100 Plan, Kuro in Syrup Village. Close his eyes, discard visual interference, and rely entirely on his body to perceive everything around him. After entering that state, even with his eyes tightly shut, everything around him appeared as clear as a 3D map before his eyes. And, in this state, the flow of time seemed to slow down. He could clearly see the tensing of Arlong's shoulder muscles, the complete trajectory of that water drop from condensation to launch. It was precisely this extraordinary perception that allowed him to make the most precise dodge at the critical moment. Here it comes again. Sensing another whooshing sound approaching, Luffy this time chose to slide sideways, dodging the second deadly water drop. Gomu rubber pistol. Almost in the instant of dodging, he exerted force with his feet, and his Gomu rubber arm shot out like a cannonball, heavily striking Arlong's hastily raised arms. Iron teeth. Arlong cried out in pain, and in his fury, he opened his gaping maw, his 2 rows of sharp, saw-like teeth fiercely biting towards Luffy's arm. This was one of Arlong's great special moves. He was a shark fish man, possessing teeth as sharp as a shark's, and they could regenerate quickly. Gomu rubber rocket. Luffy reacted extremely quickly, pulling his arms together and stretching them back to their limit. Then, like a rocket propulsion, he brought his fists together, aimed at Arlong's wide-open lower jaw, and rushed forward faster than Arlong. Bang! With a muffled thud, Arlong's still not fully closed giant mouth was savagely struck by the impact of these fierce twin fists. His upper and lower jaws collided violently, and he himself was sent flying backward by the immense force, plunging with a splash into the pond in the center of Fishman Paradise, sending up a huge spray of water. This is a devil fruit ability. The exchange between Arlong and Luffy was extremely brief, so fast that even the 3 closest Fishman executives hadn't fully seen what happened before their big brother Arlong was sent flying. But, they clearly saw Luffy's stretched out arm. An ordinary human couldn't have such long arms, which meant he was a devil fruit user. The 3 exchanged a glance, no longer hesitating, and decided to attack simultaneously to take down this devil fruit user in one go. All together. Kurubi, using Fishman karate, pushed off the ground, which trembled slightly, and charged at Luffy with the force of a collapsing mountain. Chu, meanwhile, quickly moved to the edge of the pond, took a large gulp of water, and his cheeks rapidly puffed out, clearly accumulating ammunition for the next, more violent water cannon attack. And Hachi, the octopus fish man with 6 arms, simultaneously drew 6 gleaming blades, displaying dazzling, 6-sword style swordsmanship. He moved to block Luffy's retreat from the side, with 6 streaks of blade light weaving a net of death that enveloped Luffy. However, facing the aggressive assault of the 3 fish-man officers, Luffy made no move to counter or dodge. His gaze remained fixed on the pond where Arlong had fallen into the water, his entire being on guard for the opponent's next move. He knew that Arlong could not possibly be defeated so easily. How dare he ignore them? The 3 officers' hearts burned with anger at the sight, and their attacks became even more ferocious, determined to kill this arrogant brat on the spot. Attacking the captain in front of us, aren't you taking us a little too lightly? Suddenly, a green figure swept past like a gust of wind. Clang! A crisp, prolonged metallic clang rang out. Zoro, with only the Wado Ikimonji in his hand, steadily blocked Hachi's 6 blades, which had come at him like a torrential storm. Blades met, sparks flew. Hachi's 6 arms bulged with muscle, unleashing terrifying strength capable of lifting giant reefs, yet the single blade before him remained unmoving. His pupils contracted slightly. You fool, what immense strength you have. Zoro did not reply, only gritted his teeth, fine beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. The large wound on his chest, left from his encounter with Mihawk, tore open again due to this sudden burst of full power, and blood slowly seeped out, staining the bandages. It seems I need to finish this quickly. On the other side, Sanji's figure flickered like a ghost through the crowd a few times, bypassing all the fish-man subordinates who tried to stop him. His long leg whipped out like a lash, with a sharp whooshing sound, precisely kicking towards his chosen opponent, Karubi. Bang, bang, bang. Both fought bare-handed, and as soon as they met, their fists and feet clashed, exchanging more than 10 blows in midair. Each was sent flying backward by the other's powerful force, landing on the ground and sliding a distance before regaining their balance. Karubi looked down at his faintly aching arm, then looked up at the golden-haired man opposite him, who had regained his stance and was nonchalantly lighting a cigarette. His gaze became incredibly serious. Human, who are you? And what was that kicking technique you just used? Click. Sanji closed his lighter, exhaled a faint smoke ring, looked at Karubi, and leisurely said. Me. Just a chef, from the Burati Sea restaurant in the East Blue. As for that kicking technique, well, that's naturally, specifically for cooking you fishmen. You're asking for death. Karubi's face completely darkened. Without another word, he violently pushed off the ground and charged at Sanji again. Sanji, naturally unfazed, charged forward, his legs dancing like the wind, unleashing a series of kicking techniques named after ingredients like neck meat, shoulder meat, and back meat. Meanwhile, Chu, the last officer attempting to attack Luffy, had completed his reloading. His puffed-up cheeks rapidly contracted, and then several loud bang, bang, bang sounds rang out. A barrage of water cannons, as dense as machine gun fire, shot towards Luffy's seemingly unguarded back. I got him. Seeing his water cannons fly unimpeded, almost certain to turn the brat into a sieve in the next second, a hint of joy flashed in Chu's eyes. He had hit the person even Arlong hadn't been able to hit. However, just then, a crystal-clear arrow, wreathed in chilling cold, appeared silently as if traversing space. It arrived later but struck first, piercing through all of Chu's launched water cannons from a brilliantly precise angle. The water cannons pierced by the arrow instantly froze in midair, their surfaces rapidly solidifying into ice, transforming into spherical solids that then fell to the ground with plop, plop sounds, shattering into pieces. Who's there? This unbelievable scene made Chu turn pale with fright. He abruptly turned his head, looking in the direction from which the arrow had come. He saw a blue-haired girl, holding a bow with both hands. A blinding cold light condensed into an arrow on the bowstring, which she held by the fletching with 2 slender fingers. She drew the bow again, aiming it in his direction. Chu's body stiffened abruptly, and he began to tremble uncontrollably. The moment the blue-haired girl aimed her bow at him, an extreme sense of deadly threat, like ice water, instantly permeated his entire body. If he didn't dodge, he would surely die. Absolutely die. The next moment, out of an instinct for survival, Chu chose the safest and most advantageous place for him, the pond. With a splash, Chu jumped into the pond and quickly submerged, attempting to use the cover of the water to prevent the blue-haired girl on the shore from getting any chance to aim and shoot. Ganyu looked at the rippling water, her delicate brows slightly furrowed, as if contemplating whether to enter the water to finish off this guy. She knew very well that a watery environment could double a fish man's combat power, but for her, underwater was also an excellent battleground. A Qilin, of course, could also swim. However, to go underwater now and display her characteristic of not fearing seawater would undoubtedly expose her secret of being a devil fruit user, yet not fearing water. Such a simple exposure was completely not worth it for her. Thinking this, Ganyu turned her head and looked at Usopp beside her, saying, Usopp, shouldn't you be dealing with this officer? During the tactical discussion at Nojiko's house, it was confirmed that Usopp would deal with one of the fishman officers. Zoro and Sanji had each chosen one, so the last one, Chu, was naturally left for Usopp. But he and Arlong are both hiding in the pond, so even if I wanted to fight him, I can't, can I? Usopp spread his hands, his tone regretful, but cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Good thing this guy hid in the pond, he wouldn't dare fight such a monster. It's all right, I can help you force him out, Ganyu smiled. With 2 fingers, she pulled the bowstring, the arrow tip aimed at the pond. Wait. Actually, it doesn't have to be so much trouble, right? Usopp realized how she intended to help him and couldn't help but swallow. Whoosh. No sooner had he spoken than the arrow shot through the air, instantly striking the pond's surface, then smashing into ice shards that scattered across the water. The next moment, the pond's surface seemed to be instantly plunged into a sub-zero winter. Centered on where the arrow landed, ice spread and solidified at a visible speed, making faint, crackling sounds, and it looked as if the entire pond was about to be completely frozen over. Boom. 2 rather disheveled figures crashed through the not yet fully solid ice, shot up from the water, and landed heavily back on the shore. It was Arlong and Chu. They had originally planned to lurk underwater, waiting for an opportunity to launch a surprise attack, but they found the water temperature suddenly drop and the water surface above them rapidly solidify. If they didn't escape, they feared they would be frozen in the pond. So it was you. Arlong shook off the ice shards on his body, his gaze, full of killing intent and wariness, fixed on the blue-haired girl holding the longbow. He understood everything now. The reason that marine warship escaped this morning wasn't because Admiral Aokiji intervened at all. It was clearly this human woman's doing. She had frozen the sea, making him mistakenly believe it was Admiral Aokiji. This troublesome ability completely countered them, fishmen who fought using water. He must deal with her first. Arlong's eyes gleamed with cold light, just as he was about to attack Ganyu. Arlong. Luffy's voice suddenly rang out. The next moment, a fist, carrying compressed air, slammed directly towards Arlong's face. You fool brat, do you think I really can't beat you? Arlong was furious, and his reaction was incredibly fast. He firmly gripped Luffy's incoming Gomu rubber fist with a large hand. Get up here. His entire body's muscles instantly swelled, unleashing monstrous strength far beyond that of ordinary people. He actually swung Luffy's entire body, throwing him violently into the air. Shark on darts. Immediately after, he powerfully pushed off the ground with his legs, his body shooting into the sky like a cannonball. His serrated nose, gleaming with a cold light, was like a spear, ramming fiercely towards Luffy, who had no leverage in the air. Luffy couldn't dodge in time, and his chest was solidly hit by this fierce headbutt, letting out a muffled groan. But at the moment of impact, he endured the intense pain, swallowed a mouthful of blood, and quickly extended his arms, wrapping them tightly around Arlong's body like ropes. In this entangled posture, the two flew backward and plunged together towards the tallest main building in the center of Arlong Park. Bang, 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 bang. Not long after, continuous, storm-like violent crashing sounds and loud noises of walls shattering echoed from inside the tall building. The two battled from the top floor all the way down to the bottom. Everywhere they passed, support columns broke, Walls collapsed, all decorations turned to dust, and the entire building gradually tilted and became precarious under their fight. Thanks for watching.